Chapter 458. Emotianji thought for a while. Then he made a prompt decision and said, "All right." Now that the clan is in crisis, Emotianyun has mortgaged a small part of his property. If Emotianyun wins, I must immediately take action and take down Emotianyun. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for me to move forward if Emotianyun relies on his strong financial resources to develop his strength. If Emotianyun were to lose, it would be a heaven-sent opportunity for Emotianji. I will settle accounts with your Emo clan sooner or later. Chu Yang looked coldly at Emotianji. He then said gloomily, "I wouldn't care if little Wu was well and loved. But your Emo clan has mistreated little Wu. So I might as well tell you this. Whether it's you or Emotianyun who will be in power in the future, I will take back what I owe little Wu. No one in the entire heavens can take advantage of me without paying a price if I, Chu Yang, don't want to," Chu Yang said heavily. Then, he didn't wait for Emotianji to reply. He strode out and said, "I'm going to look for Duke Yu. I'll go with you." Emotianji's face turned red as he followed Chu Yang. He had never been scolded in such an embarrassing manner. However, Emotianji had no choice but to swallow it. "Who told your clan to be so useless and heartless? You guys don't need to go. Seize the time to cultivate. We can't afford to lose tomorrow's battle," Chu Yang said to Gu Duxing and the others who had followed him. Gu Duxing nodded. He took his brothers back to continue their training. "Brother Chu, why are you so good to my younger sister?" Emotianji could see that Chu Yang was much more attentive to Emochin Wu than to her elder brother. "I like Qin Wu very much," Chu Yang replied vaguely. "But you like her too much?" Emotianji muttered in his heart. But he didn't dare to say it out loud. Chu Yang naturally didn't dare to let him know that he liked his younger sister. He wanted to wait for her to grow up so that he could marry her. Emotianji would fight him to the death if that happened. "He is as beastly as Meng Luo, don't worry. I will clean up the evil tendencies in the Emo clan bit by bit if I have the power." Emotianji sighed and said, "Brother Emo, I have something to say. But I don't know if I should say it or not," Chu Yang said as he walked. "Please speak. Setting your sights on only one clan is a bit limiting. Moreover, it's not flexible enough," Chu Yang said in a careful manner. "How could I not know?" Emotianji let out a long sigh. "Emotianyun and I were fighting for power. Could it be that I, Emotianji, was fighting for the position of the clan lord? I, Emotianji, have deep feelings for my clan." He couldn't bear to see his clan fall at the hands of Emotianyun. Emotianyun is narrow-minded. He is vicious and merciless. He will do anything to achieve his goals. The Emo clan cannot fall into his hands. He took a deep breath and said, "I want to bring my clan in charge into the upper three heavens. Fulfill the wish of the Emo clan's ancestors for dozens of generations." Chu Yang remained silent. He sped up and said, "I wish you success." The two of them hurriedly rushed forward, and soon arrived at the place where Duke Yu was. "Brother Yu, Chu Yang has come to visit. Please come out and meet me," Chu Yang shouted. His voice spread far and wide. Inside, Emochin Wu jumped up and danced in the air, its elder brother Chu Yang. This voice would appear in her dreams almost every night. It would always gently comfort her. "Xiao Wu, don't be afraid. Xiao Wu, you have me." Xiao Wu, now she had finally heard it. Emochin Wu jumped up and cheered. Then she fell down and suddenly became startled. She pricked up her small ears and nervously listened to the outside. She suddenly grabbed Jun Lulu's hand and anxiously said, "Elder sister Ah Lu, did I hear wrong? Someone was really shouting, right? That was elder brother Chu Yang's voice, right? I wasn't dreaming, right?" Jun Lulu held back her laughter and said, "I didn't hear it." Emochin Wu hung her head dejectedly. She sat down on the ground and said, "Am I really dreaming?" Jun Shiju's voice resounded, "Ah Lu, you look after this little girl. I will take a look at this king of Hell Chu." Emochin Wu was startled. Then she became ecstatic. So, it wasn't a dream. She got up and was about to rush out. But Jun Lulu didn't manage to grab her. She saw that this little girl had reached the door and had quickly turned around and ran back. She plunged her head in front of the mirror and anxiously looked left and right. Then, she turned around and rushed out again. Jun Lulu's eyes were sharp and her hands were quick. She held her and whispered, "Don't worry. Let your elder brother Chu Yang and elder sister talk business first. Then, I will give you to your elder brother Chu Yang." Mo Qingwu's eyes were filled with tears. She revealed an intensely unwilling look. But she eventually nodded in a well-behaved manner. "I want to listen," Jun Lulu repeatedly agreed. Okay. As long as you don't make any noise," Mo Qingwu silently nodded. Then she lowered her head. Her eyes were already red. After the ecstasy passed, she only felt boundless grievances bubbling up in her heart. "I want to tell elder brother Chu Yang about everything. I've suffered too much in the past year." "Boo-hoo!" The sound of footsteps came from outside. Chu Yang shouted. Then he saw someone come out and invite him in. He walked inside without thinking. Mo Tianji also wanted to follow him. But he was stopped by an imperial guard. The guard said, "Minister Jun only wants to see Minister Chu." Mo Tianji was helpless. He had no choice but to wait outside. Chu Yang walked in and saw a black-clothed woman. She was standing in the room with her back towards him. Her hair was like a cloud of mist, and her figure was graceful. She was wearing ordinary black clothes. But it gave people a feeling that she was in the clouds. It seemed as if she was an ethereal immortal. She was riding the clouds and riding the wind. "Your Excellency is..." Chu Yang's pupils shrank. He faintly guessed, "Minister Jun, right? Minister Chu has good eyesight." Jun Shizhu slowly turned around. Her sharp eyes looked at Chu Yang's face. Chu Yang felt as if a steel needle had fiercely pierced his face twice. Jun Shizhu's face was covered with a black veil. So, it couldn't be seen what she looked like. But her eyes were like bright stars in the night sky. So, people couldn't look at her directly. "Minister Chu must have come for Mo Qingwu," Jun Shizhu insipidly said. Chu Yang's mind shivered. He said, "Yes." "Mo Tianji must have gone to ask for help?" Jun Shizhu smiled. "Yes," Chu Yang calmly admitted. "Sure enough. I deliberately made things difficult for Mo Tianji because I wanted Minister Chu to come here for a chat." Jun Shizhu's voice contained a cold smile as she said, "I would have given you too much face if I had come to pay you a visit. So, I had no choice but to resort to this plan. Minister Chu, please don't take offense." Chu Yang smiled. "Minister Jun is an expert of this generation. You're a senior expert. You have a high position and power. You're the overlord of this generation. So, Chu Yang should have come to pay a visit to you." Jun Shizhu had unleashed her imposing aura when Chu Yang had come in. She had turned around and created an aura of a monarch overlooking the world. And this aura had shrouded Chu Yang. At the same time, she had been carefully observing Chu Yang's expression, voice, eyes, and even the movements of his muscles. However, she had discovered that Chu Yang hadn't changed in the slightest. He was the same as he had been when he had come in. He was neither arrogant nor overbearing. In fact, even his pulse hadn't changed. It was rare to see such a young man with such willpower among the heroes of the world. Jun Shizhu's eyes slightly flashed with a mysterious light. She thought, "No wonder little Yu values him so much. This young man is really extraordinary." "Minister Jun, there's no harm in speaking your mind," Chu Yang said. "Minister Chu, what do you think of my dark bamboo?" Jun Shizhu pondered for a moment. Then she suddenly asked, "Dark bamboo dominates the upper three heavens. So, it's naturally a first-class force." Chu Yang pondered for a moment and said, "Such a force is enough to dominate a region even in the upper three heavens. It's a pity that there are few top-notch experts. Otherwise, dark bamboo wouldn't have been the ruler of the upper three heavens. It would have been a veritable overlord of the upper three heavens. It's a pity that there are few top-notch experts." Jun Shizhu slowly repeated. Her eyes exposed a smiling expression. "That's good. I can return Mo Qingwu to you," Jun Shiju didn't beat around the bush and said, "But I want Minister Chu to promise me something. Or to give me a promise." "I never make any promises." Chu Yang insipidly said, "I never make promises to anyone or anything." He looked at Jun Shiju with a serious expression and said, "Minister Jun must be aware that the so-called promises are only used for betrayal. I don't want to break my promise to anyone. A promise is too heavy for me." The look of appreciation in Jun Shiju's eyes became even more intense. She said, "That's good. Then, you don't have to promise me anything. But, Minister Chu, you have to promise me something at an appropriate time in the future. How about it?" She smiled and said, "It's a request that won't embarrass you." Chu Yang pondered. Jun Shiju's words were simple. But, could it be that the Dark Bamboo's request was simple? Minister Chu has just arrived here. So, you can't contend with a big clan yet. In exchange, Jun Shiju, can guarantee that no one will snatch Mo Qingwu away from you. Jun Shiju smiled and stated her condition. Alright. Chu Yang made a prompt decision and agreed. This was the most troublesome matter for him at present. It's a deal. Even a galloping horse can't catch up. Both of them looked at each other and smiled. Jun Shiju felt relieved in her heart. This way, we'll have an opportunity to turn things around when that peerless master arrives. Moreover, there's still some time left. Chu Yang will be entangled with many things during this period of time. He will be in constant trouble. Moreover, his ambition will be very big. So, why would she worry about her relationship with Chu Yang? Jun Shiju hadn't thought that the peerless master she had imagined was standing in front of her at this moment. Jun Shiju gently smiled. Then, her body fluttered like a wisp of black smoke and disappeared from Chu Yang's sight. Jun Lu gently released Mo Qingwu from behind the curtain and quietly disappeared. Then, a voice that had been suppressed for a long time suddenly burst out, "Brother Chu Yang." Her voice was so loud that it almost broke her throat. Chu Yang's entire body shook. He suddenly turned his head in pleasant surprise. He saw a petite figure rushing towards him as if her life depended on it. When she was halfway there, she suddenly flew up and pounced towards him. Chu Yang subconsciously opened his arms. His eyes couldn't help but turn red. He felt a burst of fragrant wind in his arms. Then, a soft body wrapped itself around his body like an octopus. Mo Qingwu firmly stuffed her small head into his bosom. She felt happy, sad, and satisfied at the same time. She flattened her small mouth, and her voice had already changed. "Brother Chu Yang, you finally come, boo-hoo." She burst into tears before she could finish speaking. She opened her small nose and greedily breathed in Chu Yang's scent. She suddenly felt so happy that she wanted to cry. She felt so happy that her heart ached. How long have I been looking forward to this embrace? How many times have I dreamed of it? Chu Yang held her tightly and couldn't speak. Only his heart was beating intensely. "Little Wu Qingwu, I've come. I won't let you suffer any grievances. My Qingwu." Chapter 459. Qingwu. Chu Yang hugged this soft body tightly. His voice was almost hoarse. His heart trembled as he called out this name with a trembling voice. Mo Qingwu used all her strength to squeeze her petite head into Chu Yang's chest. She used all her strength to control herself so that she wouldn't cry out loud. However, her small mouth had already become extremely flat, and tears silently gushed out from her eyes. She was holding it in so much that she actually felt a little dizzy. Chu Yang felt that his clothes on his chest were quickly soaking. Then, the soaking area slowly and rapidly expanded. Mo Qingwu's body trembled slightly in his arms. However, she still didn't say a word. She clenched her teeth tightly. However, the two hands that were hugging him became more and more forceful. What kind of grievances had she suffered in this year? At this moment, she needed to vent. Vent the grievances in her heart. Chu Yang knew. Therefore, Chu Yang didn't ask anything now. If he asked, Mo Qingwu would only feel more uncomfortable. Just let her be in his arms. Just let her be in his arms and feel his feelings for her. Chu Yang quietly hugged her. He didn't speak. After a long time, Mo Qingwu's body trembled slightly. Then it slowly calmed down. Her throat made a moaning sound. She coughed a few times in Chu Yang's arms. Chu Yang could feel Mo Qingwu's breath coming out of her small mouth. It made his skin feel a little hot. Mo Qingwu tried her best to lower her head. She finally moved her head away from Chu Yang's bosom a little. But she still held him tightly. She used her free hand to wipe her tears with extreme caution. Her movements were very light. It seemed that she was afraid that Chu Yang would find out what she was doing. She didn't want Big Brother Chu Yang to see her tears after being separated for more than a year. She wanted to be happy. She wanted to smile at Brother Chu Yang. However, she couldn't help but cry. Tears of joy, tears of grievance, tears of sadness, tears of finally meeting again. She wiped hard. She wanted to wipe away her tears. Then she raised her head and smiled at Brother Chu Yang. Brother Chu Yang, I missed you so much. She wanted to show Brother Chu Yang the happy smile that Brother Chu Yang liked to see. She wanted to let this smile tell Brother Chu Yang that she was fine. Because you finally came. No matter what happened, it was all good. It was the best. However, the more he wiped, the more tears he shed. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't wipe them all away. She was a little flustered and hated herself. Why did she have to cry? Don't cry, little Wu. Brother Chu Yang is already here. Why are you still crying? You're safe. You're fine. With Brother Chu Yang by your side, no one can hurt you. She tried hard to convince herself, but she couldn't stop herself from crying. In the end, she gave up and let her tears flow out. She sobbed and said, Brother Chu Yang, I'm sorry. I want to cry when I see you. Chu Yang gently stroked her long hair. He felt that his eyes were a little dry. He said, if you want to cry, then cry. Big Brother Chu Yang will accompany you here. My light dance, regardless of crying or laughing, I like it. Everyone is happy. He hadn't even finished speaking when he heard a sound. Mo Qingwu opened her mouth and started to cry. She cried so hard that her heart was broken. Boo! Brother Chu Yang, I miss you so much. Boo-hoo, I dreamt of you that day. Boo-hoo! Mo Qingwu sobbed and cried. She used Chu Yang's clothes to wipe her tears. She poured her heart out at the same time. She couldn't remember anything now. The grievances that she had suffered had almost made her collapse several times. She had thrown them to the back of her mind. She only wanted Brother Chu Yang to know how much she missed him, how much I yearned for Brother Chu Yang's embrace. This is the only thing in the world that can make me feel at ease. Chu Yang held Mo Qingwu in his arms. He slowly walked a few steps, and sat down on the armchair that Jun Shizhu had sat on. He let this delicate and small body kneel on his lap. He tenderly looked at Mo Qingwu as she sobbed and poured her heart out. Her rosy little mouth flattened. There was a look of grievance on her face. She was very careful. It seemed as if she was afraid that Brother Chu Yang would get tired of her. Gradually, the careful look disappeared. What was left was only grievance and longing. Slowly, the grievance also disappeared. What was left was only longing. It seemed as if Mo Qingwu hadn't felt any grievance or pain in the past year or so. There was only longing. There was nothing else. Mo Qingwu lowered her head as she spoke. But she slowly began to gather the courage to raise her head and look at Chu Yang. Her eyes were brimming with tears. There was still grievance in the depths of her eyes. But it slowly began to flash with shyness and joy. Mo Qingwu's tears finally stopped. She looked at Chu Yang in a daze. Then she hugged Chu Yang's neck. Her face slowly turned red, and her eyes became swollen like peaches. She bit her lips and timidly asked, Brother Chu Yang, do I look ugly now? Chu Yang shook his head vigorously. What are you talking about? My Qingwu is always the most beautiful at any time. Brother Chu Yang can't get enough of looking at you. Mo Qingwu felt relieved. She smiled. She gently stuck her face on Chu Yang's chest and said in a low and satisfied voice, Brother Chu Yang, I'm very happy. I'm very happy. Then she closed her eyes and listened to Chu Yang's heartbeat. She felt the warm aura of Brother Chu Yang's body. She curled up in his arms like a soft kitten. The corners of her mouth exposed a trace of a touching smile. Her little mouth finally curled up in happiness. I'm not afraid at all. I'm not flustered at all. I don't have to worry at all. I don't have to feel wronged at all. Brother Chu Yang is here. I don't have to worry about my things being taken away by others. I don't have to worry about being given away as a concubine. I don't have to worry about people looking down on me and abandoning me. Brother Chu Yang will protect me. Definitely. Everything is fine. Chu Yang's heart was peaceful and satisfied. Hugging this delicate little body, he seemed to feel that his life was finally complete. Brother Chu Yang, I'm very happy. This sentence was also silently said in his heart. Jianghu, I'm also very happy. I can feel that you're full of vitality in my arms. I'm very happy. I'm very happy. He thought of his previous life. Jianghu weakly snuggled in his arms and said, Chu Yang, I look better than the sword. Then he thought of today's sentence. I'm very happy. Chu Yang instantly felt that his previous life and this life were gathered together. His mind was a mess. It was strange and variegated. It was as if at this moment, he had returned to the purple bamboo forest of his previous life. Then he suddenly returned like a dream. Feeling the warm and soft body in his arms, Chu Yang suddenly felt a burst of satisfaction. He silently said, Jianghu, if there is a next life, I will dance with you under the heavens. I'm satisfied. I will definitely dance with you under the heavens. I won't have any more regrets. He lovingly lowered his head to look, and saw that Jianghu was dressed in red. Her soft hair was draped over her shoulders, and the red cloud steel butterfly was flashing on her head. She didn't have any other accessories besides this butterfly. Her long eyelashes softly stuck to her eyelids. Like a tired butterfly, she began to stopping in this warm embrace. Jianghu contentedly and happily sighed. She moved her arms that were a little sore from hugging Chu Yang. She changed her posture, squirmed a little, and hugged him tightly again. She didn't want to let go for a moment. I wrote 2,000 words for 14 hours. I deleted more than 10,000 words. The only thing I'm satisfied with is these 2,000 words. When I typed the title, Brother Chu Yang, I'm so happy, my heart suddenly turned sour, and tears started to fall out of my eyes. I'm very happy, because I wrote the feeling I wanted. Chapter 460. As the sun set in the west, rays of multicolored light shone upon the forest in the mountains, making it look like a sea of flowing light. Chu Yang carried Jianghu and walked out with a smile. It was as if he had walked out of a fairy tale. His black robe fluttered, his figure tall. Jianghu, dressed in red, lay in his arms. The sunlight on the horizon seemed to embed a layer of gold on Chu Yang and Jianghu's bodies. At least, in Jianghu's eyes, it was a kind of beauty that shook his soul in an instant. This feeling was so harmonious, so touching. Jianghu seemed to have grown on Chu Yang's body and would not come down no matter what. From time to time, she would raise her head and smile at Chu Yang. After a while, she would raise her head and smile at him again. Her smile was bright and satisfied. Jianghu stood there, dumbfounded by what he saw. He had been waiting here for an entire afternoon, waiting anxiously. But when he saw Chu Yang finally carrying Jianghu out, he was suddenly touched at this moment. He was not in a hurry. He had never seen his little sister so happy. Such happiness and satisfaction that overflowed from the depths of her heart. Jianghu looked on with satisfaction. The anxiety that he had been waiting for an entire afternoon seemed to have disappeared without a trace at this moment. Brother Mo, I'm taking Jianghu away. Chu Yang looked at Jianghu and said solemnly. Hearing the words, Brother Mo, Jianghu raised her head in panic. She turned around and saw Jianghu, her second brother. Her eyes couldn't help but redden. But she bit her lip lightly and lowered her gaze. Little Wu, Jianghu stepped forward, his voice trembling a little. Jianghu bit her lip. After a long while, she said with difficulty, Second brother, Jianghu, do you want to go with me or Brother Chu? Jianghu looked at his sister with some longing. Second brother will also protect you. I'll go with Brother Chu Yang, Jianghu said without hesitation. Mo Tianji's eyes dimmed. I'm leaving. Chu Yang looked at Mo Tianji. Brother Mo, if you want to control the Mo clan, don't let go of this opportunity. Tianji agreed and then suddenly shouted, wait a minute. After he finished speaking, he ran over and looked at Mo Qingwu and said, little sister, I have a question that I have always wanted to ask you, but I didn't have the chance. Can I get your answer now? What is it? Mo Qingwu was still biting her rosy lips. The light in her eyes made Mo Tianji feel a heartache. Why did you suddenly become so estranged from your second brother? Mo Tianji said with some pain, second brother's heart is very uncomfortable. Mo Qingwu gritted her teeth. At this moment, it was obvious that she was using a lot of force. He looked at Mo Tianji, his second brother, with a complicated expression in his eyes. Then he asked in a low voice, I have always wanted to ask you, second brother. Why didn't you dare to look at me on the day of the clan meeting? Mo Tianji was startled and suddenly raised his head. However, Mo Qingwu continued to ask, at that time, why did you tell him about my saber? Mo Tianji was startled. He only felt bitterness in his heart. There were 1,000 things he wanted to say, but he could not say them. This time, my family has betrothed me. As long as I return, I will be engaged. However, you are the first to come and pick me up. Mo Qingwu said with some anger, second brother, don't you know what I will face when I return? Mo Tianji felt as if he was struck by lightning. He took 3 steps back. He finally knew where he was wrong. He was wrong not to say it. He did all kinds of things but did not make it clear. These 3 things were all for Mo Qingwu's good. At that time, he did not dare to look at her because he could not bear to see his younger sister sad. However, he forgot that his younger sister was the most helpless at that moment. She needed someone to look at her and show that they were on her side. That way, she would feel much better. The appearance of the saber was to make a final effort so that his younger sister could get some care after losing her original position in the family. However, he neglected that his younger sister had nothing. At that time, that saber was all her hope and spiritual sustenance. However, he cruelly took it away. Now, he came to pick her up so that he could take her away and not let her return to the family to accept that cruel fate. However, he did not say it out loud either. His younger sister thought that he was sending her back to the fire pit. Who could he blame? Could he blame his younger sister for being too sensitive? However, if it was anyone else, how could they not be sensitive in that kind of situation? How could they not be sensitive? Chu Yang sighed and said, Qingwu, your second brother truly loves and cares for you. There is absolutely no falsehood in it. He truly wants you to be well. However, your second brother's habit is to do good things but not to say it out loud. This is your second brother's shortcoming. You have to believe in your second brother. Mo Qingwu lowered her head. Her long hair covered her face. She gently nodded. Mo Tianji looked at Chu Yang with a strange feeling. He repeatedly thanked him. Thank you, Brother Chu. Thank you. Not saying what you did is equivalent to not doing it. Especially good things. Chu Yang casually said, Brother Mo, you did very well. However, what you said was not good. This weakness isn't good for being the patriarch of a family. Mo Tianji deeply nodded. He seemed to be deep in thought. He was obviously much stronger than Mo Tianyun. However, there were still many people in the family who supported Mo Tianyun. Ultimately, there was one thing. Mo Tianyun knew how to talk and win people's hearts. However, Mo Tianji had neglected this aspect. Although there were many hardcore supporters by his side, their numbers were far inferior. That was why he was at a disadvantage. Understanding this, Mo Tianji's heart suddenly became clear. Instead of acting, it was better to speak. This kind of understanding was inevitably a little cruel to people. It was unpleasant to hear, but it was the truth. After thinking this through, he was about to thank Chu Yang. However, when he turned around, he realized that Chu Yang had already carried Dian Qingwu a few hundred feet away. He hurriedly shouted, Brother Chu, little Wu, as long as I have time, I will go back to see you. Mo Qingwu raised her head from Chu Yang's embrace. Her gaze leaped over Chu Yang's shoulder. She saw her second brother standing there waving his hand vigorously. His eyes were full of reluctance. She couldn't help but feel moved. She stretched out her small hand from Chu Yang's shoulder and gently waved a few times. Mo Tianji's face was instantly full of smiles. "Thank you, little sister." Mo Qingwu's face bloomed into a smile. Then, she hid her head in Chu Yang's embrace again. Mo Tianji relaxed and let out a sigh of relief. He relaxed and smiled. Then, he gently waved the purple jade flute in his hand and placed it on the flute. A whining sound of the flute suddenly floated in the forest. Mo Qingwu listened to her second brother's flute music. She was in brother Chu Yang's embrace. Suddenly, she felt as if she was floating in the clouds. Among all the women in the world, there was no one else who could be happier than her. The next day, the sky seemed to brighten exceptionally early. Mo Qingwu woke up early and ran happily into Chu Yang's room. When she saw Chu Yang lying on the bed, she couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. It turned out that she was afraid that she was dreaming yesterday. She immediately covered her small nose with her hand and said, "It's so smelly. Brother Chu Yang's feet are so smelly." She rushed to the door and breathed in a few breaths of air. However, she couldn't bear to leave. She could only stay at the door and squat on the threshold. Smelly? Chu Yang was a little depressed. He really did wash his feet last night before going to bed. Sigh, his feet were like this. Even if he washed them 10 times in one night, there would still be a smell tomorrow morning. He remembered that Mo Qingwu's only dissatisfaction with him in his previous life was the smell of his feet. He couldn't help but smile. He rolled up and shook his body. Instantly, the room was filled with a fragrant smell. Mo Qingwu covered her nose and ran away. "Brother Chu Yang, what are you shaking for?" "It's so smelly," Chu Yang laughed loudly. The great clans were already waiting for the battle. The bet was already over. They were only waiting for the opening of the battle. The huge venue was empty. There was actually a sea of people around. There were no empty seats. The best view was in the middle. It was the territory of the dark bamboo. It occupied a huge area. On both sides were the teams of the great clans. Then, there were even more scattered people who were waiting for this big battle. Dong Wushang and the other clans were in the south. All the clans on Gao Sheng's side were in the back. The 4 great clans in charge of the bet were naturally closest to the two sides. They were observing the outcome of the battle. Everyone's hearts were in their mouths. This wasn't just a bet. It also involved one's personal wealth. Once Chu Yang and Duke Yu bet 800 million, the odds for Gao Sheng were immediately pushed down to 1-1. There were even more people who bet on Gao Sheng. In just one day, there was an additional 100 million. If this money was before, Mo Tianyun and the others would definitely be grinning from ear to ear. But now, the 4 of them could only sigh. It was just a drizzle. The sound of drums shook the heavens and the earth. The battle was about to begin. The master of ceremonies was already standing in the middle. He raised his voice and shouted, "Everyone! Silence!" It would have been better if he didn't say silence. Once he did, countless people started to clamor at once. "Wife snatching! Wife snatching!" Many people shouted at the same time. They were in high spirits. "Wife, wife, wife snatching wife." More people shouted together. "A woo wife." Luo Kudi's strange cry resounded through the sky. GMO angrily slapped his head. "What are you shouting for?" "That's my wife." Luo Kudi smiled mischievously and said, "Who are we?" "Your wife is my wife." GMO kicked him. Luo Kudi screamed strangely as he rolled in the air like a rubber ball. At this moment, a tall and sturdy figure suddenly jumped down from the spectator's stand. He landed on the stage. He raised his hand and shouted like a thunderbolt, "Wait! I have something to say." Everyone looked over. They saw that this person had big shoulders and a round waist. He was tall and sturdy. His arms were big enough for a person to stand on. His buttocks were big enough for a horse to run. What an imposing and boorish man. However, this man's chest was bulging and his buttocks were perky. It turned out that he was a woman. This was the biggest bet of this competition. Huyen Aobo and Miss Huyen had appeared. Chapter 461. Everyone! Huyan Aobo shouted. She cupped her fists and bowed. This action was extremely heroic. If it was a man doing it, it would definitely be awe-inspiring. But now that she was doing it, cough cough, she was also awe-inspiring. Ji Mo's eyes lit up. He grabbed Chu Yang's arm and said, "Boss? This is my wife. She's extremely charming." Upon hearing the words extremely amorous, Chu Yang only felt dizzy. The world was spinning, and even his feet were trembling. He sat down on Imo Qingwu's body. Imo Qingwu laughed and hugged him. She looked through the gap in Chu Yang's arm and saw the awe-inspiring Huyan Aobo. She couldn't help but exclaim, "This uncle is really tall and sturdy." Luo Kadi suddenly burst into laughter. Dong Wushang and Gu Duxing also couldn't help but laugh. Even Ji Zhu and Dong Wulei were swaying back and forth. Ji Mo's face turned bitter. "My little grand, look carefully. Is that uncle? That's sister-in-law? Okay. Sister-in-law?" Imo Qingwu was obedient and didn't say anything else. She looked at GMO with a questioning gaze, especially when she looked at Ji Mo's eyes. She seemed to have discovered something. She nodded very seriously and whispered in Chu Yang's ear, "Brother Ji Mo's eyes are small, no wonder." Chu Yang's body trembled. On the other side, Gao Sheng's face was as black as charcoal. "Everyone, as you all know, this battle is for me." Huyan Aobo exhaled and said majestically, "I am Huyan Aobo, Gao Sheng's fiancé. We have been engaged since childhood. It's the order of the clan." Everyone gradually quieted down and listened to this woman speak. "But Gao Sheng doesn't like me." In order to avoid this marriage, he even ran away from home and went to the lower three heavens. Huyan Aobo said indifferently, "I look different from ordinary women. I, Huyan Aobo, understand that he doesn't like me. After all, everyone wanted their woman to have a beautiful figure and to be lovable and charming. I admit that I'm not good-looking." Huyan Aobo said loudly, "Because I'm not good-looking, it's understandable that Gao Sheng ran away from the marriage. I won't blame him. She wouldn't hate him. If I were a man, I wouldn't want a wife like her. Don't you all agree?" Huyan Aobo roared. However, no one replied. Seeing this woman speak, everyone suddenly felt their hearts sink. "That's why I don't have much hope for my marriage. That was until I met the second son of the Ji family, GMO. He didn't abandon me and I fell in love with him. I immediately returned home and asked my family to cancel my engagement with the Gao family." Huyan Aobo said loudly, "I originally thought that this matter would be a matter of course. Because Gao Sheng ran away in order to escape the marriage. Would he want to marry me? Annulling the engagement should have been a matter of course. But who would have thought that Gao Sheng would immediately say that GMO had snatched his wife away from him? He couldn't bear the humiliation and wanted to fight GMO. This is also the origin of this matter." Huyan Aobo laughed. "How laughable is this matter? This matter is getting bigger and bigger. Now the 8 great clans are getting involved. Tens of thousands of heroes are waiting in anticipation." Huyan Aobo laughed mockingly and said, "Gao Sheng, you are so generous." Gao Sheng sat with an ashen face. He cursed in a low voice, "Bitch." Huyan Aobo laughed heartily. Then, she suddenly turned around and looked in Gao Sheng's direction. She said in a loud voice, "Gao Sheng, since you said that GMO had snatched away your lover, and didn't hesitate to create such a huge battle, I presume that you like me very much? Then, as long as you agree, I will marry you right now. Are you willing to be your wife? Do you dare to marry me?" Gao Sheng's face suddenly turned pale. Looking at Huyan Aobo's tall and sturdy body, he couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva with difficulty. "Gao Sheng, are you willing or not?" Huyan Aobo laughed loudly, "Say something." Gao Sheng finally couldn't bear it and said angrily, "You have already hooked up with GMO. How can I still want you to be my wife?" As soon as these words came out, the large field was filled with boos. "If you don't want to marry her, why are you fighting? Is it fun to fight?" Someone said loudly, This is ridiculous. Fighting for a woman, but not willing to marry her. Young Master Gao is indeed unique." Someone ridiculed. He just wants to get some compensation. In young Master Gao's heart, it's good that such a woman has left. But if he can use such a woman to gain something, then he will gain both fame and fortune. Moreover, he will show the image of a century later in front of the heroes of the world. It's really pitiful. Someone laughed loudly. Huyan Aobo looked coldly at Gao Sheng. Suddenly, she burst into laughter and said, "That's all I want to say. All right, everyone, I'm done. Those who should be beaten, fight, and those who should be watched, watch. Although I, Huyan Aobo, am not good-looking, I don't want to be called a fickle woman. I just want to say these few words. That's all. Miss Huyan, you are a good woman who dares to love and hate." A big man suddenly stood up and laughed. "If I didn't already have a wife, I would definitely fight young Master GMO to death today." Haha, everyone applauded like thunder. GMO's head was full of black lines. He muttered, "This woman really. She attracted so many love rivals with just a few words. What should I do?" As he said this, his face was full of worry. Sun Wushang, Gu Duxing and Luo Kadi rolled their eyes and looked at the sky. They thought, "This guy is crazy." We also admire Huyan Aobo's temper and character. But to marry her as a wife, we should politely decline. Mo Qingya's eyes were shining. She pulled Chu Yang's arm and whispered, "This sister's ears are so lovely." GMO on the side immediately said, Yes, her figure is also very good. Think about it. With such a wife, she can shelter you from the wind and rain. How safe would that be?" Chu Yang painfully closed his eyes. He had the urge to tear GMO into pieces. Fortunately, the competition had begun. The master of ceremonies announced loudly, "Competition of the 7 great clans. First round, Dong Wushang against Li Xiong Tu." Sun Wushang suddenly stood up. He stretched out his hand, and the pitch-black cloak on his body fluttered to the ground. His tall and majestic figure was revealed. His black saber stood erect behind his shoulder. He walked down step by step. Halfway down, he suddenly looked up to the sky and laughed loudly. His voice was like thunder, and rumbled in all directions, "Li Xiong Tu. You can give up now and let Tu Qian Hao come up. It's not too late. I'm afraid you won't have time to regret if my saber attacks you." Li Xiong Tu's tall and sturdy body suddenly stood up. His eyes were filled with a strong desire to fight. He laughed and said, "Dong Wushang, are you afraid?" Sun Wushang's eyes flashed and he said, "Very good." Both of them were thousands of feet away from each other. They looked at each other. They felt a heroic and majestic aura pressing down on them. Their desire to win was aroused, and they suddenly laughed at the same time. Chapter 462. 2 equally burly figures swept down from the stands at almost the same time, one on the left and one on the right. They flew towards the center of the arena. Although there were only 2 people, they seemed insignificant in such a grand arena. However, the people on the left clearly felt a huge mountain pressing down on them. The people on the right felt as if the earth trembled under this power. Dong Wushang's domineering aura soared to the heavens. Li Xiong Tu's heroic aura was unparalleled. These 2 people had met in the first round. It could be said that they were evenly matched. Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat. He opened his eyes wide. The 2 most domineering people among the 12 future influential people were finally facing each other here. Chu Yang had some expectations for this battle. From this battle, he could completely see the direction of development of these 2 people. Because these 2 future influential people had now begun to shape their life's achievements. Dong Wushang's falling body suddenly let out a long roar. He stretched his hand back and pulled out the black saber in midair. This action of pulling out the saber immediately made the surrounding people boil with a boom. Because of his burly figure, he gave people a feeling of being as immovable as a mountain even when he was flying. His right hand, which was stretched back, moved very slowly. Everyone could see it clearly, but it was precisely this slow movement that left behind an extremely clear welcome. The procedure of this saber was very clear. Hand raised, finger pointed to the sky, hand over the shoulder, and hand holding the saber. Every action was clearly seen. It made people's vision and feelings seriously conflicted. It was extremely uncomfortable but also extremely mysterious. Then, a long rainbow-like saber light shot out from his saber. Following the motion of pulling out the saber, a black light was emitted. Dong Wuxiang's body suddenly changed the direction of his fall. Together with his saber, he turned into a long black rainbow and flew across the sky violently. He rushed towards Li Xiongtu. He changed direction halfway, but the speed of this jump was much faster than the speed of his fall. The saber light was like a black dragon cutting through the air. It actually made a thunderous sound. The sleeves of his sleeves streaked through the air, and it actually emitted a loud crashing sound. On the opposite side, Li Xiongtu let out a wild shout at the same time Dong Wuxiang changed his move. His body rolled, and a dazzling sword light suddenly appeared. The sword aura was as thick as a drum, and its whole body was emitting a bright and dazzling light. Like the tail of a meteor in the sky, it also changed direction in the air and madly rushed toward Dong Wuxiang. The two of them had unexpectedly adopted the same strategy. The first strike was to be as powerful as a thunderbolt, giving the other party a heavy blow. He heaved a sigh of relief and said in a soft voice, "Wu Shang has won this round." Gu Duxing and Ji Imo turned to look at him. In the arena, the two of them approached each other like lightning. They were already in the sky above the arena. Dong Wuxiang's eyes shone with an intense desire to fight. He shouted, "Slash!" His voice was like a thunderclap, and his saber was like a thunderbolt. With a ferocious aura that could cut through a mountain range, his saber chopped down. Li Xiongtu didn't utter a single word as he rushed over. The sword light was blazing. Boom! The two men's majestic bodies collided with each other in midair. The saber and the saber intersected. Their forelegs were also rapidly moving like butterflies. In an instant, they had exchanged 13 saber moves, 13 sword moves, and 13 legs. With a loud bang, a wave of air rolled out and spread in all directions. Dong Wuxiang let out a long shout, and his black hair suddenly fluttered in the air. He somersaulted twice in midair and was shaken to retreat. On the opposite side, Li Xiongtu let out a muffled groan. His beard fluttered, and he made the same move as Dong Wuxiang. He somersaulted in midair and retreated 30 feet. The two of them were about to land on the ground at the same time. Dong Wuxiang pointed his black saber downwards, and the tip of the saber touched the ground. Dong Wuxiang's body, which was about to land on the ground, bounced up like a bullet. The saber light turned into a rainbow and shot straight toward Li Xiongtu's day. The curly beard on Li Xiongtu's face exploded. The tip of the beard touched the ground and bounced up. His entire body bounced up into midair and suddenly fell down. The sword light actually turned into a dazzling snow-white disc and went to meet Dong Wuxiang's attack. Dong Wuxiang's eyes flashed. His left hand was suddenly behind his back, and his right arm held the saber. The tip of the saber was slightly raised, and his body in midair changed into an even more forward-leaning posture. Following the violent momentum, the saber ruthlessly chopped on the sword-light disc. The violence of this saber made the onlookers feel like closing their eyes and couldn't bear to watch. A loud clang. The disc-like sword light suddenly became somewhat scattered. Dong Wuxiang's second saber fell down. Another loud sound rang out. Dong Wuxiang's right arm danced like a whirlwind. The heavy black saber was like a thunderbolt, violently falling down, lifting up, and falling down again, barbaric. Yes, Dong Wuxiang's fighting style was extremely barbaric. Completely unreasonable. Under such barbaric attacks, no matter what kind of fancy moves, no matter what kind of moves, it was useless. What borrowing strength to fight strength, or what kind of tricks were all just nonsense. Unless you could block his attacks and hold on until the moment the two of them separated, otherwise, you would only be reduced to dregs by his extremely barbaric attacks. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of iron being hammered rang out continuously. Li Xiongtu was suffering unspeakably. He had always been known for his great strength, and his hands were also made of specially made star iron. It weighed more than 50 kilograms, and if it were anyone else, they wouldn't be able to use it. But when facing Dong Wuxiang, he felt that the strength that he was so proud of actually paled in comparison to the other party. The other party's barbaric, violent, and completely unreasonable fighting style made Li Xiongyin, who had the same style, feel aggrieved. In the past, those who fought with Li Xiongtu would all feel this. But now, it was finally his turn to bear it. Dong Wuxiang's face was cold and expressionless, and his attacks were like a storm. The bodies of the two people kept falling, and in the process of falling, they kept colliding. Dong Wuxiang actually didn't have any fancy moves, and without the slightest bit of skill, he chopped out 10 times in a row. The two people had already landed on the ground, and with a loud bang, the saber and sword clashed. Dust and dirt flew up with a bang. Tens of thousands of people around felt their eardrums explode at the same time. Dong Wuxiang stood still, his long saber pointed forward. His eyes were cold and sharp, and he was as expressionless as steel, like an eagle. Li Xiongtu's body flew out like a cannonball with his long sword in hand. His feet landed on the ground and he flew for 70 to 80 feet before he landed on the ground with a puff sound. Then, he suddenly bounced up and spun in the air before he stood firmly on the ground. His face turned dark red for a moment before it turned pale. He raised his head and looked at Dong Wuxiang, his eyes already full of seriousness. He had actually already suffered internal injuries in this violent exchange of attacks. He didn't expect that this Dong Wuxiang, who was 4 or 5 years younger than him, actually had the strength to defeat him and even kill him. This violent attack made everyone watching the fight hold their breath, and their hearts almost jumped out of their throats. Too violent. Too satisfying. This fighting style was too hooligan. Chu Yang watched the two people fight with rapt attention and completely relaxed. Dong Wuxiang was definitely going to win this round. His strength and strength were not much different from Li Xiongtu's, and their spiritual power was also evenly matched. But Dong Wuxiang's advantage was that he could fight. He dared to fight. Moreover, Dong Wuxiang's aura was fierce and indomitable. Although Li Xiongtu's aura was domineering, he didn't have Dong Wuxiang's reckless spirit. The most important thing was, Dong Wuxiang's saber was more than 5 times the length of his opponent's sword. To tell the truth, Li Xiongtu's sword was still intact, and this was already very surprising to Chu Yang. The two people in the field looked at each other, and each roared loudly. Then, they rushed up and fought again. Du Xing, if you weren't injured, how would you deal with him? Chu Yang asked Gu Du Xing. As soon as he relaxed, Chu Yang immediately used this opportunity to teach Gu Du Xing and the others a lesson. This was a rare learning opportunity. Gu Du Xing, GMO, and Luo Kadi all turned their ears at the same time. Gu Du Xing smiled. My style is different from Li Xiongtu's. If I were to fight Wuxiang, I would launch intensive attacks from the beginning and would never compete with him in strength. I would use the speed of my body movement to restrain his unparalleled strength. I would drag it out until his aura was exhausted, and that would be when he would be defeated. Chu Yang nodded and said, this method of yours can be used to deal with others. For example, against Li Xiongtu, it would be easy. But against Wuxiang, you would need to expend several times more energy. But Gu Du Xing didn't understand. Dong Wuxiang's saber is heavy. Heavy is an advantage. And it's not just a little heavy, it's too heavy. It's not easy to grasp its weight, but once it's grasped, it will form a kind of inertia. This kind of inertia only needs to be slightly manipulated to be able to unleash the full power of the saber itself. This is the advantage of heavy weapons. Chu Yang smiled. So, you see that Wuxiang is using all his strength in every move, but in fact he isn't using much energy. And if you continue fighting like this, he will become braver and braver, and faster. So, if you have the idea of wasting his energy, the final result will be that both of you are powerless, or both of you will be injured. Your injuries will be lighter, and his injuries will be heavier. This is the difference. If it's a life and death battle, you will be heavily injured and he will die. Chu Yang said, and among the experts of the same level, perhaps only you, Gu Du Xing, can achieve such an outcome. Gu Du Xing was deep in thought. The best way to deal with Dong Wushang's fighting style is, don't let him go crazy and get excited. Suppress him right from the start. Then, you will be able to end the battle very quickly, Chu Yang said. How can you suppress him right from the start? Gu Duxing frowned and thought hard. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. Dong Wushang's strength lies in his saber. So, if you make use of your body movement to deal with his wrist before his attack reaches its peak, you will be able to deal with his wrist first. The wrist holding the saber is his Achilles heel. Yes. Chu Yang nodded. But, just like now, even if Li Xiongtu thinks of this, it's already useless. Because Dong Wushang's aura has already reached its peak, and Li Xiongtu's aura has already been reduced by half. Chapter 463. Dong Wushang and Gu Duxing were completely different. If Gu Duxing was a natural swordsman, then Dong Wushang was undoubtedly a natural warrior. A dashing warrior. Chu Yang nodded and looked at the opposite side. He saw that some people were whispering to each other. They seemed somewhat anxious. Obviously, they hadn't expected that Dong Wushang would be so powerful. Dong Wushang's reputation had risen during this time. But he was still a few years younger than Li Xiongtu's day. Who would have thought that Dong Wushang would be able to firmly suppress Li Xiongtu? Especially the gamblers. Each of them opened their eyes wide. They were so nervous that they didn't dare to breathe. However, a few people had gathered together and were whispering to each other. They were the leaders of the Gao clan, Li clan, and Tu clan. They were looking at the scene with dignified expressions. Chu Yang's eyes flashed. He thought, so that's how it is. They want to take advantage of this competition. They want to form an alliance regardless of whether they win or lose. Presumably, this is the real intention of the Gao clan to provoke this decisive battle. It doesn't matter whether Dong Wushang wins or loses. The Dong clan and the Li clan are facing each other. These two clans are both colossi. So, the conflict between them will become more and more intense. Having a powerful ally in this situation is like sending charcoal in the snow. Jun Shizhu gently sighed on the other side. She said, Li Xiongtu lost. Duke Yu stood beside her with his hands clasped behind his back. He looked at the scene without blinking. He slowly nodded and said, but both of them have great potential. Jun Shizhu thought for a moment and said, Dong Wushang should be stronger. Duke Yu said, Li Xiongtu made a strategic mistake. Li Xiongtu may not necessarily lose if he were to face Dong Wushang again. But Dong Wushang is 5 years younger than Li Xiongtu's day, Jun Shizhu said, you only look at the fighting strength. You don't think about this. But this is a very important factor. Moreover, you must pay attention to one thing. Dong Wushang started to improve rapidly after he met Chu Yang. In other words, he was far inferior to Li Xiongtu's day. He only used a little more than a year to defeat him. This is the key point. Jun Shizhu sighed and said, I'm suddenly very interested in this king of Halchu. Duke Yu nodded lightly and said, he is indeed a strange person. Moreover, its potential has reached a frightening level. Jun Shizhu's eyes lit up as she said, frightening? She pondered for a moment and then said, do you want to go and take a look? Duke Wei replied, all right. Then his figure suddenly distorted and disappeared from Jun Shizhu's side. Jun Shizhu's eyes flashed. She then faintly whispered, Little Wei's otherworldly phantom technique has strengthened a lot? Could it be that he received some kind of stimulation and progressed? Jun Lulu faintly smiled. Her eyes flashed with a proud brilliance. When Duke Yu came to Chu Yang's side, he saw Mo Qingwu sitting in Chu Yang's arms. She was happily peeling an orange, and stuffed a piece of the fruit into Chu Yang's mouth. Then she stuffed the other piece into her own mouth. She puffed up her cheeks, and asked in a delicate and sweet voice, Is it sweet? Chu Yang moaned in satisfaction and said, It's too sweet. After Xiao Wu's hands, it's indeed sweeter. Mo Qingwu smiled with satisfaction, then eat another petal. It's so sweet that you'll die. Then she tore another piece and stuffed it into his mouth. Chu Yang chewed the orange, and listened to this sweet sound. Suddenly he felt absent-minded, and a name emerged in the bottom of his heart, Little Tian Tian. He couldn't help but sigh softly. The space beside him distorted, and Duke Yu appeared beside him. He said, "So cool." Chu Yang snorted and said, "Are your injuries healed?" Duke Yu snorted. He sat on the seat beside Chu Yang that Mo Qingwu had vacated, and said, "Your injuries also healed very quickly." "Same here." Chu Yang blinked. A chaotic sound of metal clashing resounded in the field. Dong Wushang's loud shouts were getting more and more majestic. Li Xiong too roared wildly, and did his best to counterattack. It was only a fight between two people. However, these two people had fought with a fierce and desperate aura of a magnificent army with thousands of men and horses. Dong Wushang roared loudly. The saber light and the sword shadow fiercely clashed together. Chu Yang closed his eyes and sighed, "Li Xiong too lost." Duke Yu nodded. In the field, the saber light and the sword shadow faded away. Dong Wushang stood upright in the field, and blood flowed from his shoulder like a waterfall. Li Xiong too staggered backward. There was a line of blood on his forehead, and a terrifying saber wound on his chest. He retreated more than 100 feet, and was about to fall down. He hurriedly used his long sword to support himself on the ground. With a snap, the long sword broke. This sword had already clashed with Dong Wushang's black saber hundreds of times. It couldn't bear the heavy burden, and was full of scars. The moment he supported himself on the ground, it broke immediately. Li Xiong too staggered, and sat on the ground. He roared and gasped for breath. Suddenly, he laughed bitterly, and roared towards the sky, satisfying. He continued, "I've lost." Dong Wushang was expressionless. He held his saber and bowed. Then he turned around and left. Li Xiong too shouted, "Dong Wushang, I'll look for you again. I don't need you to show mercy." Dong Wushang didn't even turn his head. He said, "Next time I'll kill you." Li Xiong too laughed heroically and said loudly, "Motherfucker, it's fine if I've lost, but I've actually been sold a favor for not killing me. I've really suffered a great loss today." He turned his head and looked at the MC fiercely. "Why aren't you announcing the result? Motherfucker, is it satisfying to sit here in a sorry state?" The MC was shocked. He hurriedly said loudly, "The first round of the competition between the 7 great clans, Dong Wushang versus Li Xiong Tuesday Dong Wushang wins." After he finished speaking, he hurriedly helped Li Xiong Tu up, and helped him down. Li Xiong Tu didn't have any strength in his body, but he laughed as he walked. He shouted repeatedly, "Satisfying. It's satisfying to fight like this." Duke Yu said, "How was it?" Chu Yang naturally understood what he meant. He said, "Very good." Dong Wushang's victory was already expected. But Li Xiong too didn't lose his fighting spirit even though he lost. "It's very rare." Duke Yu smiled. "You really understood what I meant. An ordinary person would have thought that Li Xiong too would have lost if he fought Dong Wushang again after this defeat. But they would have overlooked the firmness of Li Xiong tu's heart of martial arts. This defeat, especially in the hands of Dong Wushang who has a similar style of fighting style, is a good thing for him." Chu Yang nodded. How can one of the 12 influential figures of the future of the 3 heavens lose his fighting spirit so easily? Ao Xie Yun, Xie Dan Qiong, and O Du Xiao looked solemn in another direction. Ao Xie Yun softly sighed and said, "How was it?" Xie Dan Qiong bitterly smiled in shame. "I'm afraid that I would have had no choice but to throw out the viburnum flower if I had fought against Dong Wushang. The consequence would have been that I would have died, and he would have been seriously injured. It would have been equivalent to my defeat." O Du Xiao nodded in agreement and said, "I could have killed him, but I would have had to use poison. But it's also possible that I wouldn't have had enough time to use the poison, and would have been cut down by his saber. I don't have any assurance that I would have been able to use the poison technique in the face of such an attack." Ao Xie Yun nodded. Dong Wushang has truly stepped into the top ranks after this fight. He pondered for a moment and said, "I'm afraid that I would have had to pay a great price if I had fought against Dong Wushang. I didn't expect that Dong Wushang would have become so dreadful." Dong Wushang returned with large strides, and was greeted with a bear hug from Luo Kudi. The second fight. Gao Liang of the Gao clan will fight against Luo Ku Wu of the Luo clan. The voice of the master of ceremonies came from afar. Luo Ku Wu laughed out loud. He looked at Luo Kudi apologetically. Then he stood up and walked down step by step. Gao Liang is the external younger brother of the Gao clan. He used to be a servant of the Gao clan. But the clan saw that Gao Liang's aptitude was extraordinary. So, the clan bestowed him with the surname Gao and trained him vigorously. He should be a first-grade sword king at present. He's 32 years old. Luo Kudi's complexion was solemn as he said, "I'm afraid that my elder brother may lose this fight." Chu Yang narrowed his eyes and looked at the two people walking towards the stage. He sighed and said, "It's not that he may lose, but he's bound to lose. Luo Kudi, your elder brother, doesn't have a fighting spirit. If he really wanted to fight, it was still possible for him to fight until both sides suffered heavy losses. But the problem is, he doesn't want to fight this fight." Luo Kudi sighed and drooped his head. He knew his elder brother's thoughts. He wasn't a legitimate son and couldn't threaten his elder brother's position. So, he had always had a good relationship with his elder brother. But the problem was that he didn't get the clan's acknowledgement for this matter. It was already very good that his elder brother had come. Moreover, there was another reason. Luo Ku Wu had once received Gao Liang's favor. The other party had deliberately arranged the two of them for this fight. They must have seen this point. Even if Luo Ku Wu could win, it would only be a draw. What's more, he couldn't win. Chu Yang had already thought of this point. He said, "It's okay. We only need 4 wins out of 7. That's enough." Sure enough, Luo Ku Wu lost by a single move as expected. The next fight was between Jianghu and Gao Meng. Gao Meng was the second duke of the Gao clan. He wasn't a legitimate son either, but he was a martial arts genius. Jianghu entered the stage, and the two of them fought fiercely. In the end, both of them didn't have any strength left and could only shake hands and make peace. 1 win, 1 loss, and 1 draw. What a pity! Duke Yu shook his head and sighed. Meanwhile, Jun Shizhu, who was watching the fight on the other side, also said, "What a pity." Duke Yu saw that Chu Yang had turned his head to look at him. So, he said, Jianghu could have won. But the great dream divine technique he's practicing has reached a bottleneck. And it's time for him to make a breakthrough. He'll have to wait for the next opportunity if he gets injured. Jianghu can't afford to wait. So, he can only end the fight peacefully. Great dream divine technique? Chu Yang smiled. No wonder he's so lazy. It turns out that he's practicing this kind of lazy technique. Duke Yu smiled and said, "In fact, you can help him make a breakthrough as soon as possible." Chu Yang curled his lips and said, "I don't have that ability." Duke Yu smiled meaningfully. The fourth fight. Tu Wancheng against Dong Wu Lei. Dong Wu Shang's complexion changed. He said, "I admit defeat in this fight." Tu Wancheng was a king-level expert of the previous generation of the Tu clan. He had always been vicious and merciless. Even Dong Wu Shang wouldn't necessarily be able to win against Tu Wancheng, let alone Dong Wu Lei. It was obvious that Tu Qianhao was bullying people in this fight. Chu Yang's side had 1 win, 2 losses, and 1 draw after Dong Wu Lei had admitted defeat. Chu Yang was at a disadvantage. Everyone who had bet on Gao Sheng to win was grinning from ear to ear. The fifth fight. Tu clan's representative is Tu Qianhao against Gu clan's Gu Duxing. The atmosphere of the entire arena exploded along with these words. Many people had bet on Gu Duxing's injury. It could be said that this fight was the key. There was basically no need to compete if Gu Duxing lost. Gu Duxing's injury wasn't a secret. How could he defeat Tu Qianhao, who was at the same level as him, while he was seriously injured? Chapter 464. Gu Duxing stood up with a swoosh sound. His stature was as straight as a sword. He walked down with an indomitable sharpness. Suddenly, a sword intent surged in the air. However, people with high cultivations could faintly see that Gu Duxing's complexion was somewhat pale. It seemed that he was seriously injured and hadn't recovered yet. They couldn't help but sigh inwardly. It seems that Gu Duxing won't have much luck in this match. A sharp light flashed in Tu Qianhao's eyes. He then burst into loud laughter. Brother Gu, you and I are facing each other again today. Gu Duxing faintly smiled and said, yes, Brother Tu has been preparing for this match for a long time. I can't bear to disappoint you, Brother Tuesday. A trace of embarrassment flashed in Tu Qianhao's eyes. He then smiled and said, Brother Gu is indeed free and easy. I'm afraid that I won't be able to hold back in this match. Please forgive me if I injure Brother Gu. Dong Wushang exposed an angry look in his eyes. He then said from behind Gu Duxing, second brother, kill him. Kill this son of a bitch. Gu Duxing slightly nodded. He then raised his voice and said, I'll be embarrassed if I injure Brother Tuesday. Suddenly, his figure flashed, and he flew down. It seemed as if a sword had been thrown out of his hand. His sleeves fluttered in the wind. His gaze was sharp. Each and every move of his was filled with a sharp sword intent. Everyone's spirit was lifted. Tu Qianhao also flew down. The two of them were old rivals. They had fought many times in the past year. Gu Duxing had been no match for Tu Qianhao in the beginning. However, he was now on par with Tu Qianhao. Moreover, Gu Duxing's reputation had soared all the way. In fact, he was now faintly on par with the number 1 Gong Ao Xie Yun. All of this had raised an intense murderous intention in Tu Qianhao's heart. Tu Qianhao wanted to take advantage of Gu Duxing's injury to cripple him in one fell swoop. And the purpose of his participation in this match was Gu Duxing. Tu Qianhao looked at Gu Duxing on the opposite side with rapt attention. His opponent's face was pale. He couldn't help but rejoice in his heart. Mo Tianyun's information was correct. This guy's injury isn't light. The eyes of Duke Yu and Jun Shizhu on the other side flashed with a playful look. Duke Yu smiled and said, King of Hell Chu, do you want to kill Tu Qianhao? Chu Yang smiled faintly. A murderous look flashed across his eyes as he said, if he wants to take advantage of me, then he must be prepared to go for wool and come home shorn. Duke Yu laughed mischievously, kill him? Chu Yang spread out his hands indifferently. This depends on Du Xing's intentions. Killing sometimes required skills and methods. For example, how to clear your name after killing someone. At this time, the two people on the field had already drawn their swords. Most of the gamblers who had bet on Gao Xing were beaming with joy. He seemed to see the banknotes flying into his pocket. On the high platform, Ao Xian sighed and said, it would be too unfair if Gu Duxing were to lose because of his injuries. What a pity for this lone traveler. Therefore, he could naturally see what Tu Qianhao wanted to do with a single glance. Then, he frowned and asked, have you arranged for the people who are ready? Xie Dan Qiong smiled confidently, of course. Well, we must act immediately no matter who wins or loses. We must gather those poor bastards who have lost their family's fortune. Then, our 3 clans will divide the spoils equally. Don't let Mo Tianyun take advantage of us, Ao Shiyun said. Well, I'm afraid that Gao clan also has this idea. We can only snatch a part of it at most. Du Shao was somewhat annoyed. I'm afraid that our 3 clans would have been destroyed tomorrow if we had snatched all of it. Ao Shiyun faintly smiled, we must maintain a balance at all times. The two people gently nodded and said with a smile, Gao Xing has pulled together a small alliance in this gambling match. But they didn't expect that they would also form an alliance with their opponents. Moreover, our 3 clans will advance and retreat together because of this matter. Our interests are intertwined. Swift and fierce sword energy crazily burst forth. The two people on the field had already started to fight. 2 groups of sword light flashed at the same time as they started to fight. Then they spread out. Unexpectedly, no one could see their figures. Gu Duxing's sword light also gave people a feeling of loneliness and arrogance. On the other hand, Tu Qianhao's sword light had a swift and fierce murderous aura. No one knew that the 2 people on the field were talking in a low voice while they were fighting. Gu Duxing, you're dead today. Tu Qianhao crazily brandished his sword. His face exposed a pleased smile. Blame, blame yourself for being in the limelight. Gu Duxing coldly snorted, "It's not certain who will die." A loud, clang sound was heard as Tu Qianhao fiercely blocked with his sword. Gu Duxing's body staggered, and he retreated a few steps. His face flushed red. A long sword was a light and agile weapon. So, it would never appear in a fight between experts unless it was a special sword like Li Xiongtu's. However, Tu Qianhao was very proud of himself at the moment. So, he wanted to use such a method to humiliate the seriously injured Gu Duxing. Everyone sighed as they saw Gu Duxing's situation. It seems that this genius of the Gu clan, the leading figure of the younger generation, is going to fall in such a sullen manner in this competition? Tu Qianhao was in high spirits. He was going all out with every move he made. He would roar every time he brandished his sword. He seemed quite heroic. He had a bit of Dong Wuxiang's style. However, Dong Wuxiang gave people the impression that he was mighty and overbearing. So, Tu Qianhao gave people the impression that he was a petty person intoxicated by success. Gu Duxing retreated step by step. His body would violently sway every time he received a sword attack. He would then retreat a few steps. His pale face had turned red, and his forehead seemed to be dripping with sweat. Tu Qianhao became even more high-spirited. No one could see it except for a few observant people. Gu Duxing's every parry seemed to be very difficult. He was at a complete disadvantage. However, his body would sway back, and he would consume Tu Qianhao's attacks. However, Tu Qianhao was able to withstand Gu Duxing's rebounding force. That was because he hadn't retreated a single step. His imposing aura was like a rainbow. Tu Qianhao's consumption of spiritual power was far greater than Gu Duxing's under such circumstances. Tu Qianhao wouldn't have been so foolish in normal circumstances. However, he didn't care about this consumption at this moment. That was because defeating Gu Duxing in this manner in front of all the heroes of the world was the most supreme glory. His reputation would surpass Ao Xieyun's in one fell swoop as long as Gu Duxing was defeated today. And he would become the #1 person of the younger generation. The reason was very simple: Gu Duxing and Ao Xieyun, these two were equally famous. The sound of impact continued to resound. Gu Duxing had already retreated around the big platform in a crooked manner. Tu Qianhao was also somewhat out of breath. However, Gu Duxing was still swaying on the opposite side. But he didn't fall down. Tu Qianhao was furious in his heart. This bastard is still stubbornly holding on for what? The anger in his heart rose, and he exerted even more strength. He sent out 18 sword attacks in a row. Then, Tu Qianhao suddenly realized that Gu Duxing had raised his face and was faintly smiling at him. His smile was full of ridicule. He was looking at Tu Qianhao as if he was looking at an idiot. Tu Qianhao's heart moved. He instinctively sensed that something was wrong. "You're really stupid. How did a person like you become the Grand Duke of the Tu clan?" Gu Duxing whispered, "The Mo clan and my Gu clan have always been allies. You stepped into such a trap. It's really making me feel embarrassed." Tu Qianhao was startled. His mind suddenly went blank. Trap? Mo Tianyun framed me? But his 10th sword attack had already fiercely chopped down. Gu Duxing let out a long and loud shout under the watchful eyes of everyone. His body suddenly straightened up. It seemed as if a peerless sharp sword had suddenly been unsheathed. It emitted a startling radiance. The black dragon sword in his hand rushed out like a furious dragon and fiercely collided with Tu Qianhao's sword. Bang! Gu Duxing's posture was straight and straight. His face was cold and stern. Tu Qianhao screamed. He staggered back with his sword. A footprint appeared on the ground as he took one step back. Then he took 3 steps back. Suddenly, he felt something sweet in his throat. He looked up to the sky and spat out a mouthful of scarlet blood. Gu Duxing counterattacked with his sword, and Tu Qianhao was immediately seriously injured. The sound of a tsunami from the spectators' stands disappeared in an instant. Everyone looked at this scene in disbelief. They almost couldn't believe their own eyes. How is this possible? Gu Duxing let out a clear shout. He moved forward with his sword and chopped down. He then said in a low voice, "I'm not injured. Do you understand now?" Tu Qianhao's eyes opened wide in anger. He looked at Gu Duxing. He was so angry that he couldn't speak. At this moment, his heart was filled with boundless hatred for one person, Emotian Yun. This bastard gave me false information. So, Emotian Yun and Gu Duxing are in cahoots. Tu Qianhao was so angry that he collapsed when he realized this. Bastard Emotian Yun. Damned Emotian Yun. Emotian Yun is so wicked that he doesn't even have an asshole. I will kill you You made me suffer so much. You made me suffer so much. Tu Qianhao was extremely indignant. He wanted to curse. But a mouthful of blood gushed out. He opened his mouth to spit it out. Gu Duxing's sword had already come over. Tu Qianhao could only block it head-on. Bang! Tu Qianhao's body staggered back. And he spat out another mouthful of blood. Gu Duxing took a big step forward and swung his sword again. Gu Duxing was dealing with Tu Qianhao in the same way he had dealt with Tu Qianhao a moment ago. The situation had completely reversed. The eyeballs of the spectators' stands fell to the ground. Fuck. This situation is unimaginable. Gu Duxing was bound to lose, but he had turned defeat into victory. And Tu Qianhao, who was bound to win, was battered and exhausted. Emotian Yun asked me to cripple you. Gu Duxing swung his sword again. I also didn't want to. But our Gu clan and the Mo clan had been friends for decades. So, I had no choice but to agree. Tu Qianhao, you can only blame yourself for being too stupid. Tu Qianhao looked at him with grief and indignation. He felt as if his heart was about to explode. He finally spat out mouthfuls of blood. Then he bellowed, "I will kill you all." His heart was filled with boundless hatred. And it had almost materialized at this moment. Tu Qianhao would have eaten Emotian Yun alive if he had been in front of him at this moment. His agility and swordsmanship had become disorganized under extreme anger. And he had exposed his weakness. Gu Duxing let out a long and loud shout. The black dragon's sword trembled for a while. Then he swung his sword 3 times in a row. Tu Qianhao's chest, right shoulder, and face were slashed. Then a sword light blossomed in front of his chest. Gu Duxing laughed heartily. Then he raised his foot and ferociously stamped on Tu Qianhao's chest. He kicked this Grand Duke of the Tu clan and one of the future 12 influential figures and sent him flying. Chapter 465. Tu Qianhao was sent flying hundreds of feet away. He felt as if the sky and earth were spinning. He spouted a mouthful of blood and fell into a semi-conscious state. He only heard Gu Duxing whisper urgently, "Emotian Yun asked me to carve the words number 1 fool in the world on your chest if your plan failed. I'm sorry, but I've already done it. Although you won't be able to hear me anymore." However, Tu Qianhao had heard it. He had fainted from anger because he had heard it. The entire place was silent. No one had expected such an outcome. The insufferably arrogant Tu Qianhao had been sent flying by a kick like a broken sack. Gu Duxing leisurely returned in triumph. The people of Tu clan came forward and carried Tu Qianhao away. They looked at Gu Duxing with a complicated expression in their eyes. Gu Duxing has obviously shown mercy. Tu Qianhao didn't die. His injuries were serious, but they weren't life-threatening. Moreover, they weren't crippled. We owe Gu Duxing a big favor. O Du Shao and Xie Dan Qiong opened their eyes wide. They stretched their necks forward and blankly looked at the field. There were only 2 words in their hearts. It's over. We've lost miserably this time. Ao Xie Yun's eyes were also somewhat blank. His eyeballs were showing signs of turning blue. He suddenly patted his thigh, and his complexion turned somewhat sinister. Motherfucker! We've been schemed against. This evil duke had always been graceful and elegant. But he had unexpectedly spouted vulgarities today for the first time. He finally understood why Chu Yang had suddenly thrown down such a big bet. Why did the Dark Bamboo Gang let go of the hidden bid after they had rearranged it? Instead, They had thrown 500 million into the open bid. There's a reasonable reason for all of this now. However, this reason left people speechless and aggrieved. Gu Duxing wasn't injured. In fact, his injuries weren't as serious as Mo Tianyun had said. He had already recovered. And Tu Qianhao had suffered a big loss because of this. Otherwise, Tu Qianhao would have been able to fight with Gu Duxing with his strength. But he had lost in a muddle. Moreover, he had lost so miserably that he didn't have the strength to turn the situation around. The three great dukes looked at each other in dismay. They looked at each other's mournful expressions and felt extremely aggrieved in their hearts. Motherfucker! Which one of us isn't a genius? Who is less scheming? How could he be fooled like this? Stop sighing. That's not a good expression. Ao Shiyun recovered very quickly. He smiled lightly and said, "Actually, we should be rejoicing. Luckily, young Master Mo took that 1 billion for himself. Otherwise, if we were to pay another billion, our three families would really be bankrupt. I'm afraid that the three of us would also have to sell ourselves back as slaves to repay our debts." Odu Shao and Xie Dan Qiong finally reacted. They smiled in a manner that was uglier than crying. Ao Shiyun pursed his lips and said, Look at Grand Duke Mo's expression. How exciting this moment is." Hearing this, the two of them looked over. As expected, they couldn't help but laugh at his misfortune. He saw that Mo Tianyun was lying on his seat with his limbs spread wide open. It seemed as if he was paralyzed. His face was deathly pale, and his lips were trembling. His eyes were filled with shock and indescribable fear. He had already turned into a deathly gray color. Mo Tianyun had personally planned this gamble. He had exhausted all his efforts, racked his brains, and used up all his assets to create such a situation. Xie Dan Qiong and Odu Shao felt as if they had taken a cold bath on a hot summer day when they imagined Mo Tianyun's current mood. Their entire bodies felt extremely refreshed. Normally, they wouldn't be so happy if they were about to lose several billion. However, they were very proud. This kind of mood was very strange. It was as if they hadn't lost. Instead, they were happy as if they had won. Motherfucker, I lost. I lost. But you, Mo Tianyun, are much more miserable than us. It turns out that I'm not the most miserable one. They felt a lot more comfortable as they thought of this. The fifth match, Gu Duxing versus Tu Qianhao. Gu Duxing wins. The voice of the master of ceremonies reverberated. He was so shocked that his tone changed. It couldn't be helped. It was too unexpected. The entire spectator stands on all sides boiled up with this loud shout. It seemed as if oil had been poured on the fire. How is this possible? Didn't they say that Gu Duxing was injured? Who said that Gu Duxing won't live long? Motherfucker, how could they not have bet on Ji Mo's victory if they hadn't said so? I'm so angry. What's going on? He won? Who the fuck released this fake news? I'm going to kill him and bring him home. Didn't they say that he was injured by Mo Tianyun? Motherfucker Mo Tianyun. He cheated me. I bet 200,000. Motherfucker Tu Qianhao. He's so awesome every day. Who would have thought that he couldn't beat Gu Duxing? Fuck, this bastard has been eating for several years more than Gu Duxing, motherfucker. His diarrhea is several times heavier than Gu Duxing's. He's a fucking piece of trash. He's making me lose money. Mo Tianyun released this fake news? Mo Tianyun released this fake news? Mo Tianyun released this fake news? Mo Tianyun deceived us. Suddenly, someone started to wail. Hundreds of people responded to his call. Countless people started to shed tears. One person suddenly stood up and loudly shouted, "Motherfucker Mo Tianyun." These words immediately resonated in everyone's hearts. They were the best embodiment of their inner thoughts. Immediately, thousands of people started to shout in unison like a tsunami, "Motherfucker Mo Tianyun! Motherfucker Mo Tianyun! Motherfucker Mo Tianyun!" The cultivations of these people weren't ordinary. So, they simultaneously used their full strength to shout. And their momentum shook the heavens. Mo Tianyun's prestige had reached the peak of his life at this moment. Chu Yang looked at Gu Duxing who had come forward. He blinked his eyes in tacit understanding. You didn't kill him? I didn't kill him. Gu Duxing's grave and stern face exposed a sneer. Let him play with Mo Tianyun first. It won't be too late to kill him later. He winked at Chu Yang as he said this. Chu Yang couldn't help but smile. He suddenly recalled Gu Duxing's invisible sword energy. He suddenly realized that Gu Duxing wouldn't let Tu Qianhao off so kindly. 2 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw. This was equivalent to not having fought a single match. There were still 2 matches left. However, the mood of the spectators' stands had exploded like a barrel of gunpowder. It couldn't be contained any longer. Mo Tianyun's stand was flooded with banana peels, fruit cores, and other things in the blink of an eye. There were also many people who took off their shoes and threw them over. There were also some strange things. Mo Tianyun's stand had opened a grocery store in an instant. There were only things that one couldn't think of. The strangest thing was that there were also a few underwear that had been thrown over. They still carried body temperature and the smell of cosmetics. It was hard to tell where they had come from. The master of ceremonies was somewhat at a loss as to what to do on the stage. It was useless for him to shout now. The match couldn't be carried out. The excited crowd couldn't hear him no matter what he said. Duke Yu, who was beside Chu Yang, wrinkled his brows. Then he suddenly let out a long and loud shout. Wind and thunder surged and suppressed the shouts of thousands of people in one fell swoop. Duke Yu scolded loudly, "What are you shouting for? Do you all want to die? Which one of you will come out and let me see?" "It's Duke Yu," the crowd cried out in a low voice. Everyone's face was still full of indignation. But they didn't dare to jump out and cause trouble. "Duke Yu, this guy will kill someone if he says one more word. Moreover, Jun Shizhu is also here. How could everyone forget about this?" Duke Yu looked around and said, "People of Dark Bamboo, listen to my orders. Maintain order on the stage. Kill whoever dares to make a ruckus." His voice carried a heavy murderous aura. Everyone could hear it clearly. "Master Yu!" All the people of Dark Bamboo shouted together. Everyone was silent out of fear. Chu Yang exclaimed in his heart. The people of Dark Bamboo would maintain order. It was much more effective than Ao Xie Yun and the other righteous people. The master of ceremonies heaved a sigh of relief. Then he hastily shouted, "Match number 1. Luo Kadi of Luo clan versus Li Hong Tu of Li clan." Luo Kadi let out a loud howl, and Xing Shui struggled to stand up. He looked up to the sky and howled, "Awo, it's finally my turn." At this moment, Gao Sheng suddenly laughed out loud. He stood up and said loudly, "Jim, it's 2 wins, 2 losses and 1 draw now. Let's skip Luo Kadi's match. You and I will decide the winner directly. How about it?" He smiled and said, "GMO, you know that a fight between you and me is inevitable. So, why don't we settle it here? Show your courage in front of all the heroes of the world, and fight with me." Everyone cursed Gao Sheng for being shameless when these words came out. It was obvious that Li Hongtu was no match for this newly promoted king-level Master Wolf Sword. So, Gao Sheng was clearly avoiding the important and dwelling on the trivial by mentioning this point. "Gao Sheng, do you want to save your face?" Huyen Aobo stood up in another direction. Her face was full of anger. "Snatch someone's love? How can you say that?" Luo Kadi was also furious. "Gao Sheng, what do you mean?" Gao Sheng didn't answer. He only looked at GMO. GMO laughed out loud. He stood up and said loudly, "Gao Sheng, I was just about to teach you a lesson. You're a flashy bastard who occupies the latrine but doesn't take a shit." Huyen Aobo's face turned black. She fiercely looked at GMO. Then she sat down angrily. "Occupying the latrine but doesn't take a shit? What do you mean? GMO, you're dead." Huyen Xiaohui thought angrily in her heart. He doesn't know how to talk. This bastard's mouth must be taught a lesson. Chu Yang looked at Gao Sheng and said in a low and hurried voice, "GMO, don't forget what I said." GMO nodded. He pursed his lips and said, "Don't worry, big brother. I will win." This match isn't optimistic. Duke Yu looked at GMO, and then looked at Gao Sheng. He frowned. With his insight, he could naturally see that although GMO had rushed up quickly, his foundation was not enough. Gao Sheng, on the other hand, was fighting steadily and surely. Both of them were second-grade king-level masters. But Gao Sheng was at the peak of second-grade king level. And GMO was at second-grade king-level master. There was a big difference between them. I think GMO will win, Chu Yang said confidently. There may be twists and turns, but he will win in the end. Are you so sure? Duke Yu suspiciously looked at GMO and Gao Sheng. He re-evaluated in his heart, and felt that Gao Sheng had a bigger chance of winning. He couldn't help but doubt Chu Yang's words. He could see everything clearly at a glance. There wouldn't be any accident. Brother Yu, why don't we make another bet? Let's add some stakes? Chu Yang narrowed his eyes. He looked at Duke Yu's eyes as if he had found a mountain of gold. Chapter 466. A bet? Duke Yu tilted his head and looked at Chu Yang. He couldn't help but mutter in his heart. If it was someone else, Duke Yu would definitely bet without hesitation. But the one in front of him was Chu Yang. Duke Yu had long been wary of this fellow's elusive methods. His eyes flickered as he thought for a while. Finally, he felt confident. Even if GMO had super powerful methods or exquisite sword moves like Chu Yang's, or even if he could make Gao Sheng panic, the final victory might not be able to surpass his level. He asked, "What do you want to bet?" The sword spirit hurriedly reminded him in his mind, "White crystals." Bet his white crystals. What the Tribulation Sword needs the most now is not the more high-end purple crystals, but white crystals. Chu Yang smiled and understood. He said, "How many white crystals do you have?" Duke Yu's eyes flickered. He said unhappily, "Are you looking down on my white crystals? How big is your appetite? You're asking me how many I have. I'll bet as much as you have." Chu Yang was very calm and composed. He was very rich now. In the tribulation space, there were 2 rare herbs, jade snow spirit ginseng, and piles of mysterious jade ice crystals and mysterious yang jade. Any one of them was a rare treasure in the world. When it came to gambling, he was not afraid of anyone. "I don't have many white crystals." Duke Yu looked at him with some ridicule, "But I only have a few tens of thousands of them. And there's a white crystal mine. You want all of them? What are you betting with?" The sword spirit quickly calculated in his mind. His face was shining. Tens of thousands of white crystal mine. This is going to be rich. If the Tribulation Sword absorbed all of them, it would be able to upgrade by a whole level. A piece of mysterious jade ice crystal and a piece of mysterious yang jade. The sword spirit gave the price. Both of them are the size of a fist. Chu Yang almost fainted. "You want to bet Duke Yu's entire white crystal mine with just a piece of mysterious jade ice crystal and a piece of mysterious yang jade? Don't worry, just say it like that." The sword spirit was full of confidence. "Duke Yu should be practicing the shadow sect. Although these 2 pieces of jade are not worth such a high price, he will definitely bet. He thinks this is what he needs the most right now. White crystals are just a burden to someone like him." "What are you betting against me?" Duke Yu looked at Chu Yang playfully. He found it somewhat funny in his heart. "When did I start using my wealth to smash people? However." Duke Yu felt a sense of accomplishment in his heart when he saw that the little girl was left speechless. "This is the most precious thing I have." Chu Yang sighed. "If you're satisfied, then let's make a bet. If you're not satisfied, then just pretend that I didn't say anything." Chu Yang reached into his bosom and fished it out. Then he hung his head dejectedly and said, "Only these 2 pieces are all of my assets." Duke Yu was smiling smugly when he saw the things that Chu Yang took out. His mouth suddenly opened wide, and his eyes bulged out. In Chu Yang's palm, there were 2 fist-sized pieces of jade stacked together. The top piece emitted a faint chill, while the bottom piece emitted a faint warmth. One hot, one cold, one yin, one yang. It seemed as if an absolutely balanced cycle had been formed in Chu Yang's hands. A misty white and warm moisture rose up from Chu Yang's palm. It didn't disperse, and just floated there. Mysterious jade ice crystal? Mysterious yang jade? Duke Yu's eyes were fixed. His Adam's apple moved up and down as if he was swallowing something. Is it okay? Chu Yang asked somewhat nervously. I know it's a little too little. I can't do anything if you don't want to make a bet. It's a little too little. These are a lot. Duke Yu said emotionlessly, let's make a bet. How can I not make a bet? I'll make a bet. A real man keeps his word. I won't regret a promise even if I die 100 times. Then let's make a bet. Chu Yang asked with certainty. Let's make a bet. Duke Yu anxiously snatched the mysterious jade ice crystal and mysterious yang jade. He fondled them lovingly and said, I'll take care of the gambling capital. I'll be the notary. You don't have to worry, right? You don't have to worry? Chu Yang was speechless. You're participating in the bet. You're the party involved. You're the notary? Is there such a saying in the world? Don't worry. Duke Yu patted his shoulder and said, I won't let you make a loss. If you lose, these things will be mine. Then, I'll compensate you with 1,000 white crystals. If you win, I'll exchange all my white crystals with you. How about it? Chu Yang was furious. This guy's words were too shameless. What do you mean by, if I win? I'll bet all your white crystals. Chu Yang flew into a rage. Hey, it's meaningless if you're anxious, isn't it? Duke Yu said shamelessly, you see, these 2 pieces of jade are already in my hands. You can't do anything even if I run away with them, right? But my character is good. Not only did I not run away, I even stayed behind to gamble with you. Moreover, I'll compensate you if I win the bet. I won't go back on my word if I lose the bet. You should be grateful to me. There are many people who kill and rob in these 3 days. How many of them talk about integrity like me? Duke Yu said. Chu Yang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Fine, you'll take them away if you win the bet. You'll still take them away if you lose the bet. Talk about integrity? Brother, if you go into business, you'll definitely be as rich as a country. Fine, but I have a request. Chu Yang finally revealed his foxtail. Since you've taken advantage of me, I'll naturally have my own request. If you lose, I'll go to your treasury and personally inspect the goods. In addition, I'll also take away the purple crystal core that you owe me in the lower 3 heavens. Duke Yu was displeased. Do you think I'll go back on my word? Chu Yang thought, you still have the face to say this? What you're doing right now is going back on your word from start to finish. What do you think? Chu Yang sneered. Duke Yu reached out and put his arm around his shoulder. As if they were good brothers, he said, Fine, it's settled then. It's a deal then. Hee, then no matter who wins or loses, these 2 pieces of jade will be mine. This Duke will not decline this responsibility. Who asked me to be the most qualified in the lower 3 heavens? Don't you think so? Chu Yang turned his face away and spat. He really had nothing to say. Mo Qingwu, who had been listening to their conversation in his arms, raised her head and looked at Duke Yu angrily. You're really too bad. You actually cheated my brother Chu Yang's things. In my opinion, you should return these 2 pieces of jade to brother Chu Yang. Then, no matter who wins or loses, you should give all the things in your treasury to brother Chu Yang. Ugh. Duke Yu glared at this little girl. Finally, he spread his hands helplessly and said, I'm a little unreasonable. But I'm not as unreasonable as you. You're the unreasonable one. Mo Qingwu said fiercely. Fine, I'm unreasonable. Duke Yu dejectedly admitted. Then he turned around and went to sit with Gu Duxing, far away from this troublesome place. From afar, he could still hear the little girl pouting and muttering in dissatisfaction. This is too unreasonable. Duke Yu staggered and almost fell to the ground. In Chu Yang's mind, the sword spirit was very happy. He said, You'll be rich as long as you win this round. What do you mean? Chu Yang asked in puzzlement. There are so many white crystals. The essence contained in them can allow the tribulation sword to break away from the level of ordinary metals like gold, silver, copper, and iron. It can be upgraded to a spirit sword. Once it becomes a spirit sword, you can treat Mo Qing Wu's injuries. The sword spirit tempted. I can treat her injuries now. Chu Yang rolled his eyes. Doesn't this require an extremely safe space? Nonsense. If you treat her injuries now, of course, you can heal her 3 meridians. But the greatest effect of the heavy pill will be wasted. The sword spirit rolled his eyes. But after upgrading to a spirit sword, I can use the heavy pill to connect her 3 meridians. Then I can seal the medicinal efficacy in her body. As she progresses level by level, it will gradually increase. Then, when she reaches the Emperor level, the medicinal efficacy in her body will completely explode, and she will rush to the Monarch level in one fell swoop. This is the true power of the heavy pill. Moreover, as long as you do this, not only will her cultivation speed far surpass that of any so-called genius, but it will also play a life-saving role in critical moments. The sword spirit snorted and said, "That's all. You decide. If you insist on treating her injuries at this time, I won't stop you." Chu Yang was overjoyed. He said, "What else is there to say? Of course, I have to get the white crystals first. Anyway, I will rely on Duke Yu to get the white crystals after the fight. It won't take much effort." The sword spirit looked at him in disdain. Then he sank into his consciousness and didn't speak. Ejimo's appearance was somewhat low-key. He walked down step by step. He secretly adjusted his strength with every step he took. He knew that the gap between him and Gao Xing wasn't small. Therefore, he didn't dare to be the slightest bit careless. He tried hard to control his temper. He didn't want to waste any bit of his strength outside of the fight. Flying down was naturally very glorious. But GMO didn't want to waste this little bit of strength. After all, this was related to his marriage. Who would his wife belong to? Gao Xing didn't have any psychological pressure whether he won or lost. But he couldn't do the same for himself. Gao Xing had been waiting on the field for a while. But GMO was still walking down at a moderate pace. He couldn't help but say angrily, "Can you be faster?" GMO rolled his eyes. "What does it matter to you whether I'm fast or slow? Are you that anxious to get beaten up?" He was cautious in his heart. But he didn't want to suffer a loss with his mouth. He remembered Big Brother Chu's teachings in his heart. You must be calm. Don't be anxious. Of course, it would be more ideal if you could scold Gao Xing until he became anxious. Go ahead. I believe in your eloquence. Gao Xing sneered and said, "GMO, are you afraid? What's wrong? You have the guts to do it, but you don't have the guts to bear the consequences?" Gao Xing, this sentence of yours is ridiculous. What do you mean by having the guts but not the guts to bear the consequences? GMO let out a long laugh. Do you think that such a big occasion would have happened if I hadn't agreed? This sentence was true. Gao Xing had proposed a challenge. But there wouldn't have been this grand occasion if GMO hadn't agreed. GMO said in a loud voice, "I, GMO, have come at least. I, GMO, have come at you. The least. I, GMO, dare to take responsibility. I dare to love. I dare to fight for my woman. The least. I, GMO, am not like some people who run away from an engagement. If you don't want to, then just say that you don't want to, right? No one is forcing you. But you're still dragging it out. You won't cancel the engagement." "Why?" GMO roared. "You've taken a fancy to the Huyan clan's status and wealth. Do you think that the heroes of the world are stupid? That they can't see your intentions? Everyone. Don't you think so?" GMO raised his voice and roared. Thousands of people responded in unison, "Yes." GMO became even more complacent. He waved his hand in all directions in a very graceful manner. He assumed the role of a leader. Then he continued to speak eloquently, "Gao Xing, you covet strength and covet wealth. This is human nature. Even if you say it out loud, you'll only say that your character isn't good. But what you shouldn't do the most is to ruthlessly delay a woman's youth while coveting everything. How much is a woman's youth? You're hogging it like this. But you don't have any follow-up. Are you still human?" Gao Sheng's lips trembled with anger. He pointed his finger at GMO. You're talking nonsense. I'm Gao Xing. How can I be that kind of person? You are. GMO bellowed condescendingly. He saw that Gao Xing still wanted to refute him. So he continued to shout, You are. Tens of thousands of people roared with laughter. Then thousands of people joined in the fun and shouted, You are. Huyen Aobo stood in a daze in the Huyen clan's camp. She looked at GMO from afar. She suddenly felt sad and moved in her heart. GMO raised his hand in a dignified manner. Everyone, this brother hasn't finished speaking. Second Master G, please speak. Everyone burst into laughter. But they didn't make any noise. I, GMO, have spared no effort. I have traveled thousands of miles. I have traveled through the stars and the moon. I have come here to participate in this battle for the sake of my beloved daughter. But GMO looked up and roared, It's because of the true feelings in my heart. Oh, dog ant. Tens of thousands of people shouted at the same time, For the true feelings in my heart. Oh, dog ant. Then, someone quietly asked the person beside him, Brother, this dog ant, what is she? That person was waving his arms and shouting. But, he replied in a bad mood, How would I know what she is? You go and ask Second Master G. Then, he continued to wave his arms and roar, For the true feelings in my heart. Oh, dog ant. GMO walked down a few steps in high spirits. Then, he waved his arms and shouted, I will rescue my beloved daughter from the evil young master's hands. I will give her happiness. I will give her a future. I won't let some evil people with ulterior motives succeed in their schemes. Dog ant. Tens of thousands of people shouted in unison, Second Master G is mighty. Dog ant. GMO was in high spirits. He waved his arms. His entire face was impassioned. He suddenly felt his blood boiling. He raised his hand towards the sky and roared, Heaven, give me strength. Let me defeat evil. Let me save her. Protect her. Accompany her. Give her happiness. Then he suddenly roared in an earth-shattering manner, Make her my wife. Awo, everyone was boiling over. The entire audience was boiling over. Who had ever seen such a bold courtship in this day and age? Huyen Aobo looked at GMO with boundless tenderness in her eyes. Many womenfolk of the Huyen clan had also arrived behind her. They were hugging their shoulders and saying that this was too corny. But their eyes were flashing with deep envy. Gao Sheng was fuming with anger at this moment. His body trembled, and he almost spouted a mouthful of blood. Fuck, GMO, have you come here to fight? Or to sing? Chapter 467. GMO walked down from the top. Halfway down, he had already stirred up the crowd's emotions. At first, only the people from the Gu, Luo, Dong, and Ji clans and those who had bet on GMO were cheering. But later on, the entire crowd was cheering. Even those who had bet on Gao Xing were cheering. Because GMO's words had struck a chord in everyone's hearts. It's understandable for you to pursue power and wealth. But you can't force a girl you don't even like to get all these for power and wealth. Not only are you letting down the two great clans and that girl, you're also letting down yourself. Then what right do you have to fight for all these? You actually want to duel with someone because of this? I bet on you because I want to win money, but this doesn't mean that I don't despise your character. I'll scold you, I'll boo you, but as long as you win, I'll still take the money. I'll praise you, I'll support you, but if you lose, I'll still compensate you. What's wrong with that? Therefore, Second Master G's prestige grew. As he walked down, he waved his hand gracefully. His face was radiant, and he was so moved that his buttocks were unconsciously swaying. Hence, he started to sing this song, swaying his hips and even walking with his feet splayed outwards. He was as steady as a mountain as he walked down the stairs. We must win. Second Master G raised his arms and shouted. We must win. The crowd shouted in unison. We must defend our true love. Second Master G took 2 steps forward and continued to shout in a majestic manner. Defend our true love. The crowd shouted together. We must defeat the devil. Second Master Ji continued to work hard. Defeat the devil. The crowd's emotions grew more and more excited. Oh, whoa! Second Master Ji waved his arms. His lips curled up and he let out a standard wolf howl. Oh, whoa! The crowd howled together. Dog ant. Second Master Ji was so excited that he couldn't tell north from south. He swayed his buttocks and jumped. Dog ant. The crowd was boiling with excitement. Below, Gao Xing was so angry that his hands and feet were cold. His face was sallow and his lips were trembling. He looked at the incomparably cool GMO with hatred. With a cracking sound, one of his teeth was crushed. If I can't kill you all. Gao Xing thought frantically. On the spectator stand, Chu Yang looked at Duke Yu. Are you still sure that Gao Xing will win? Duke Yu let out a long sigh. I can't be sure. Now that GMO was in the limelight, Gao Xing was so angry that he became impatient. He will not be able to maintain his icy state of mind during the battle, and the outcome will be hard to predict. Chu Yang chuckled mischievously. He pointed at the boiling crowd and said, These are all forces. They are also important conditions for the decisive battle. The saying, the more the merrier, isn't just for show. Duke Wei said, There's nothing wrong with using such methods. However, it's still somewhat despicable. Chu Yang sneered, This is a decisive battle. He had to make use of every possible factor to attack the enemy. Was that enough? It was far from enough. Just wait and see. GMO finally walked down from the grandstand. Then, he arrogantly stepped onto the field. He walked for a full hour on this path. This made Gao Xing, who was waiting below, miserable beyond words. When Gao Xing saw GMO come down, he immediately became angry. 3,000 flames of anger rushed into his heart. Prepare to die. He rushed out after he finished speaking. Wait. GMO roared. He stretched out his hand and gestured for him to stop. Gao Xing stopped and asked angrily, What are you doing? Why haven't you said, start? GMO said to the Master of Ceremonies with dissatisfaction, Can't you see that young Master Gao can't wait to be beaten up? Gao Xing's whole body suddenly trembled. Fine, GMO, I will let you see who is the one who can't wait to be beaten up. The Master of Ceremonies had a strange look on his face. He finally raised his hand. The battle begins. The Master of Ceremonies hadn't even finished speaking when Gao Xing rushed over impatiently. He rushed in front of GMO, and his fists blew the hair on GMO's forehead into a mess. Wait! GMO shouted like a thunderbolt. He stared at Gao Xing and stood motionless. Gao Xing was so angry that he had no choice but to stop. He gritted his teeth and said in anger, Again. Who would have thought that GMO would suddenly throw a punch at Gao Xing's face? Gao Xing's nose started to bleed crazily, and his face started to bleed. Gao Xing felt a sharp pain, and his tear glands were affected. He could not open his eyes, and tears flowed out of his eyes. GMO laughed. I said, wait. I need to make the first move. He did not show any mercy and continued to punch Gao Xing 3 times, followed by 2 kicks. He took advantage of the opportunity when Gao Xing was covering his face with his hands. Gao Xing was sent flying like a sandbag. The noisy venue suddenly became silent. Everyone saw this scene, and their heads were in a knot. They could not react. GMO caught up with Gao Xing at lightning speed. He then kicked Gao Xing's body in an awe-inspiring manner. Then he proudly shouted, Humph! You asterisk shoal! The Master of Ceremonies had said, Start, and you actually listened to me when I asked you to wait? Then why didn't you die when I asked you to? You asterisk shoal! Gao Xing rolled and crawled away. He was battered and exhausted. His whole body was in unbearable pain. He was so angry that his liver hurt. However, the gamblers in the stands finally understood. They started to curse, GMO, you are so shameless. You sneak attacked. Then someone retorted, Bullshit. What's a sneak attack? This is a duel. The Master of Ceremonies had said that the duel would start. Who can be blamed for Gao Xing not being on guard? I can only say that he's *Shoal. There's nothing else to say. Would you be an accountant if you were in my place? Absolutely not. What this guy said was pure bullshit. In such a situation, if one was caught off guard, there was an 80% chance that someone would fall for it. However, these words had successfully instigated a rebellion. Gao Xing, are you stupid? The duel has started. Are you still dreaming? Motherfucker, GMO asked you to stop, and you stopped? Why are you so obedient? He's your opponent, not your father. I owe my silver. Gao Xing was so angry that blood rushed to his head. He quickly jumped up and wiped his face. His handsome face was covered with blood. He looked ferocious and terrifying. He roared and crazily rushed over. Hold on. GMO shouted loudly. However, Gao Xing didn't pay attention to him. He roared and rushed forward. However, he saw a sword light flash in front of his eyes. He felt pain on his body and hastily retreated. He felt a piercing pain. He lowered his head to look and couldn't help but suck in a cold breath. There was a sword mark on his chest. His flesh had been cut open, and his bones could almost be seen. You are despicable. Gao Xing was so angry that he became muddle-headed. This bastard had actually pulled out his sword without making a sound. I was so angry that I didn't notice when he pulled out his sword. I said wait, because I wanted to remind you, you haven't pulled out your sword yet? GMO innocently shrugged his shoulders. Fuck, I was being kind. Everyone, have you seen me? I kindly reminded him to pull out his sword. Who in the three heavens doesn't know that I, GMO, use a sword? He scolded me because of this. Everyone, you can't be a good person. You have a good heart. But, you will be treated as a donkey's liver and lungs. Gao Xing roared and spat out a mouthful of blood. GMO, you didn't make a sound when you pulled out your sword. It was clearly a deliberate sneak attack. The gamblers in the stands faintly felt that something was wrong. So, they immediately changed sides. Yes, your sword didn't make a sound. It was clearly a premeditated sneak attack. Everyone, I'm being wrongly accused. GMO turned around to let Gao Xing see. You see, the entire three heavens knows that I use a sheathless sword. Where did I get a sheath? Thousands of people shouted at the same time. Yes, Second Master Ji's sword doesn't have a sheath. These thousands of people were clearly supporting him. However, the crowd didn't understand. So, they turned to blame Gao Xing. You motherfucker, your opponent's sword doesn't have a sheath. You didn't know? You even got injured because of this. Gao Xing was so angry that his vision turned black. When did GMO use a sheathless sword? How come I didn't know? This is clearly a lie. But, GMO had already rushed over energetically. Gao Xing, don't say that I bullied you in front of all the heroes in the world. Come, let's have a fair fight. I won't take advantage of you. His words were so righteous that it inspired reverence. It attracted a round of applause. Gao Xing's stomach twitched. He was so angry that he almost spat out another mouthful of blood. You first broke my nose and caused my vision to blur. Then, you took the opportunity to beat me up. Then, you almost crippled my leg with a sneak attack. You made me so angry that I spat out blood. Now, you want to have a fair fight with me? You even said that you won't take advantage of me? How can you take advantage of me? Gao Xing was so angry that the muscles on his face were twitching. He suppressed his anger and pulled out his sword. He couldn't wait to chop GMO into meat paste. GMO shouted as he dodged. Good sword. So despicable. Damn, despicable. He jumped around like a nimble monkey. Gao Xing shouted and increased the speed of his sword. He attacked GMO like a storm. GMO suddenly stopped talking. He seemed to be having a hard time fighting. In fact, he was having a hard time. Gao Xing's cultivation was a notch higher than his. Even though he was in a state of frenzy, he was still very powerful. GMO was silent, and Gao Xing was proud of himself. You are only good with your mouth. How can you be my opponent when we fight? They fought in silence for a long time. GMO was defending most of the time, while Gao Xing attacked. GMO was about to be forced into a desperate situation. Gao Sheng's sword net had already formed a dense net. GMO suddenly screamed miserably. Ah-ha! This scream was so sudden that the spectators were shocked. Their scalps went numb, and they felt a chill down their spines. Even Gao Sheng was puzzled. Where did he get cut? He looked over. His sword slowed down, and GMO used his sword to counterattack like a storm. As he attacked, he muttered, "Fuck, I almost got cut." Chapter 468. Gao Sheng was furious. Knowing that he had fallen into a trap, he didn't say a word and attacked fiercely with his sword. GMO's toes lightly touched the ground, and his body quickly retreated backwards. Gao Sheng madly chased after him. GMO suddenly used all the strength in his body to fly backwards and widen the distance between them. Suddenly, he opened his eyes wide and looked behind Gao Sheng. Then he shouted with grief and indignation on his face, "Gao Chang! Don't tell me you want to bully me with numbers? This is in front of all the heroes of the world." Gao Sheng was furious. He turned his head and shouted, "Who told you to come?" But he didn't find anyone behind him. Following that, the sharp sound of a golden blade slicing through the air behind him made him realize that he had been tricked. It was already too late for him to turn around, so he swung his sword backwards with all his might. At the same time, he twisted his body and flew backwards while maintaining a weird posture. Two clang sounds were heard. Gao Sheng felt a strong force on his buttocks. GMO had ferociously kicked his buttocks, and he was sent flying in the air. Gao Sheng spat out blood in midair, not because he was beaten, but because he was angry. The pain in his body was far inferior to the grievance in his heart. GMO didn't wait for him to get up. Instead, he flew over with his sword in his hand. He shouted loudly, "Gao Sheng, stand up. Let's have a fair fight." Gao Sheng turned over and stood up. He wanted to vomit blood in his heart. She had enough time to stand up, but when he shouted, it seemed like he was deliberately leaving time for her to stand up. However, by the time he stood up, GMO had already arrived in the air with a sword light. Gao Sheng stood on the ground. This time, it was his turn to defend. GMO's sword light was like a tiger's. It carried a strong impact force. He didn't let his opponent off. His attacks were getting more and more intense. Gao Sheng was already suffering from internal and external troubles. He was so sullen that he wanted to die. Now that he was being suppressed and beaten, his heart felt even more uncomfortable. They only defended frantically, trying their best to find any opportunity to counterattack. However, GMO's attacks were like the Yangtze River. They were unceasingly flowing. Gao Sheng had a thorough understanding of the Ji clan's sword techniques before the decisive battle. But he discovered that GMO's sword techniques were often mixed with some strange sword techniques this time. Moreover, he had never seen these sword moves before, yet they were extraordinarily powerful. Every move he made left him in a sorry state. Dang 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 sounds kept ringing out. Gao Sheng continuously retreated step by step. GMO's figure continuously chased after him in the air. His imposing manner was very aggressive. Finally, his breath was exhausted. Gao Sheng sensed that the opponent's offensive was about to come to an end. So, he gathered his strength and prepared to counterattack. However, he saw GMO somersaulting backwards and flying far away. He shouted, "Don't say that I didn't give you fairness. Now, it's your turn to attack me." Gao Sheng, who was about to attack, suddenly saw stars in front of his eyes. His body swayed a few times. How shameless! If you didn't tell me, do you think I wouldn't know how to attack? Someone in the stands shouted loudly, "Second Master Ji. This is a decisive battle, Second Master Ji. Don't give him a chance to catch his breath. You're so benevolent and righteous, but they won't appreciate it. Hurry up and attack, Second Master Ji." This guy was the one who had been forced to bet against GMO by Luo Kudi's sword. He couldn't help but shout when he saw that victory was in sight. His face was full of resentment. At such a crucial moment, he actually let his opponent attack? Ayaya, My second Master Ji, he is your opponent in the final battle. Why are you still so particular about your demeanor? This guy couldn't wait to rush down and fight on behalf of GMO. My silver is about to fall into my hands. He couldn't imagine that GMO looked confident and at ease. But he didn't have the strength to attack. If he continued to attack, he would have been counterattacked by his opponent. And that would have been disastrous. Second Master Ji is so benevolent and righteous. Many people praised him. Especially when he was compared to Gao Sheng, Second Master Ji appeared even more heroic and straightforward. Gao Sheng had already suffered internal injuries. Moreover, he had been angered to the point of muddle-headedness. Then, he had been hit repeatedly. He had suffered a lot of punches and kicks. So, his internal organs had been severely shaken. The sword wound on his thigh was still bleeding. He heard that such a despicable person had used such a shameless method, and had won the reputation of being benevolent and righteous. So, he couldn't help but roar, "You're talking nonsense. You're all talking nonsense." Wah! He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood as soon as these words came out of his mouth. His vision became blurry as he spat out this mouthful of blood. His body was on the verge of collapse. Gao Sheng lost. Duke Yu looked at the field and pondered. He had seen Ji Mo's method clearly. But he didn't laugh. Instead, he was pondering. This method is very powerful. Without shedding a drop of blood. Duke Yu looked at Chu Yang. "It's your doing, right?" Chu Yang laughed and said, "Half of it." Gao Sheng can be considered a rising star. His composure can be considered good. But he was angered to the point of insanity. If it had been someone else, they would have died from anger before they could even make a move. Duke Yu sighed. It's not a brilliant plan. But it's extremely effective. Chu Yang smiled and said, "Of course, the most important factor is GMO himself." Duke Yu was startled. Then he laughed. Yes. This plan would have been useless against GMO if he wasn't so thick-skinned. Mo Qingwu giggled. Brother GMO's skin has always been the thickest. Duke Yu's face turned serious as he said, "You're wrong. Your brother Chu Yang's skin is 100 times thicker than your brother GMO's. 1,000 times. Mo Qingwu pouted unhappily. She looked at Duke Yu and snorted, "But you still snatched my brother Chu Yang's things. Your skin is 1,000 times thicker than brother Chu Yang's." "No, it's 10,000 times thicker." Duke Yu pretended not to hear. He glared at the scene and ignored her. His face didn't change at all. He was indeed thick-skinned. On the scene, Gao Sheng was gasping for breath. He felt that the world was spinning. He couldn't suppress his internal injuries any longer. He heard GMO shout from the opposite side, "Are you coming or not? Are you coming or not? I'm giving you a chance. I'll count to 3. If you don't come, I'll go over. 1, 2, 3. I'm going over. I'm going over to hit you. I'm really going over to hit you. Fuck, make a sound? Do you really want me to go over?" Gao Sheng screamed and spat out a mouthful of blood. He didn't wait for GMO to really come over. Then he fainted. His body went soft and he fell to the ground with a shwa sound. He was unconscious. GMO was startled. He looked at young Master Gao who had fallen to the ground. He thought, is this a trick? Therefore, he continued to shout, "Get up! Get up!" Second Master Ji is straightforward and upright. He is benevolent and righteous. He has noble character and unquestionable integrity. He has never attacked an enemy who has fallen to the ground. "Get up! Get up!" However, Gao Sheng couldn't stand up no matter how much he shouted. Moreover, he couldn't hear him. Fortunately, he couldn't hear him. Otherwise, he would have fainted again. Did he really faint? GMO cautiously approached him and kicked him with the tip of his foot. But Gao Sheng didn't respond. Fuck, he really fainted? He really fainted? He really fainted. GMO kicked him a few times. But he didn't get any response. So, he was finally sure that he had fainted. He couldn't help but touch his head. He was puzzled. "I didn't hit you much. How did you faint?" He stood there and pondered for a while. Then, he turned his head and said to the Master of Ceremonies, "I seem to have won, right?" Master of Ceremonies, does this count as my win? GMO was somewhat uncertain. He didn't fight back when I hit him? You won. The Master of Ceremonies was speechless as he replied. Well, you've also won here. Then, why don't you quickly announce that I've won? GMO glared at him and said, You're the Master of Ceremonies. But you're somewhat slow. Why are you still standing there and dreaming? The Master of Ceremonies was so angry that he almost fainted. He hastily retreated a few steps. He calmed down and adjusted his breathing. Then he shouted, The final battle. GMO wins. He didn't need to say it. Everyone knew it. That was because the audience was already in chaos. The sky had been turned upside down. Many people were wailing and crying. The money that they had accumulated through years of hard work had gone down the drain. This group of people had basically bet all their assets. Even if they still had pocket money on hand, they didn't have much left. Gao Sheng's defeat was equivalent to these people losing their entire fortune. Many people started to curse. He's a piece of trash. He's so much older than his opponent. And he's a level higher than him. But he's not his opponent. Goddamn Gao Sheng. He's making us lose money. These people had bet most of their fortune. But they still had some savings. But they were extremely angry in their hearts. Many people were crazily laughing. He won. He won. He won. I didn't expect. These people had bet on GMO. Some people were remorseful. Motherfucker. I would have bet more if I had known this earlier. I would have bet even with a high interest rate. I would have bet as much as I could. Motherfucker. These people were greedy and insatiable. The happiest person was obviously that fat man who had been forced by Luo Kadi to bet on GMO. He was dancing with joy at this moment. In fact, he didn't even know what his surname was. This is a great help. It's no wonder that fortune teller said that my life is good. I had already lost money. But someone pointed a sword at me. What is this if not good life? Of course, the most miserable person was undoubtedly young Master Mo Tianyun. Young Master Mo had also fainted the moment Gao Sheng had fainted. He hadn't woken up yet. Perhaps he would rather not wake up. After all, he would have had to face billions of debts if he woke up. What about the people of Gao clan? GMO finally remembered something important. Take out the marriage contract. Tear it up. Your marriage contract doesn't exist from now on. Only our love will exist. Everyone felt like vomiting. Gao Meng of Gao clan took out the marriage contract and handed it over to GMO in front of everyone. Then he led his men to carry Gao Sheng out. Gao Sheng had already woken up. But he was so angry that his heart hurt. Moreover, he was extremely ashamed. So, he pretended to be unconscious as he was carried out. GMO tore the marriage contract to shreds. He raised his hands, and they turned into white butterflies. He then jumped up with a sound. I won. I won. Alba, you're my wife. Whoa. Chapter 469. Odu Shao and Xie Dan Qiong signed an IOU. Everyone had a helpless and sullen feeling in their hearts. Mo Tianyun also lifted his brush. But he felt that the brush was extremely heavy. He couldn't write those words no matter what. Can I really afford it? How can I pay it back? I have almost emptied the clan's liquid funds. And I have mortgaged 4 of our 8 major industries. The Mo clan is rich and powerful. But these 2 brothers have been messing around with each other these past few years. So, it has become an empty shell. Brother Mo? Chu Yang smiled and said, It's just an IOU. It's only 525 million. Don't tell me that brother can't even come up with this amount of money? Mo Tianyun's complexion turned ashen. He wouldn't have done anything if he had come up with this amount of money under normal circumstances. But he had just lost more than 2 billion. And he had mortgaged 4 of his industries. So, his pockets were empty even if he had money. Ao Xie Yun, Xie Dan Qiong, and Odu Shao looked at him with a hint of schadenfreude. You deserve it. You were greedy. You wanted to hog 1 billion for yourself. Now, you taste your retribution, right? Pa, Brother Chu, you see, can you be more lenient? Mo Tianyun clenched his teeth and said in a low voice. He had finally decided to put down his pride. After all, he had no choice but to lower his head under the eaves. Now he was in the enemy's hands. So, what else could he do if he didn't show any weakness? Brother, you're in the wrong here, Chu Yang interrupted him in annoyance. He then asked bluntly, do you have no money? It's indeed somewhat difficult. Mo Tianyun braced himself. That's right, I can also see that Brother Mo is definitely in trouble. Otherwise, you wouldn't have borrowed that 1 billion. Chu Yang sneered and said, but, Brother Mo, do you think that we can play this game of taking a white wolf without risking anything? My intelligence is beyond your expectations. And you, Mo Tianyun, aren't an idiot, right? Mo Tianyun retreated step by step. But, Chu Yang pressed on step by step. You retreat 1 step, I advance 2 steps. His attitude was arrogant. His face was full of contempt. His eyes were full of disdain. I will kill you. I will anger you. I will play you to death. Chu Yang felt a burst of pleasure in his heart when he thought about how Mo Jianghu had been bullied by this guy. The other archdukes beside him were also gloating. They were having a great time. Normally, who would be able to force the #1 successor of a large aristocratic family to such a sorry state? Mo Tianyun's complexion turned pale. He forcefully restrained his anger. He swallowed his anger and said, as long as Brother Chu is willing to extend the deadline by 10 days to half a month, this Mo, no matter what, I will gather them for you. Ha! Chu Yang looked up to the sky and laughed. Then, he said ruthlessly, no matter what, you must give me this OU today. Since he said 3 days, he couldn't delay it by even 2 hours. If Brother Mo is unwilling to pay up, I won't force you. There are many witnesses here. Gambling debts must be paid with one's life. This is the rule of the martial world. He sneered, his eyes shooting out a sharp light like a sword, and said in a low voice, Brother do as you see fit. Gu Du Xing hugged his long sword and casually said, I can help Brother Mo. I can guarantee that you will die a quick and painless death. My sword is very fast. No one in the 3 heavens can deny this. Dong Wushang's eyes emitted a bloodthirsty light. He said, Mo Tianyun, I, Dong Wushang, can also help you. My saber is well known in the 3 heavens. As he spoke, his fighting spirit was rising. His murderous aura was surging. One of his hands was already holding the hilt of his saber. Xie Dan Qiong couldn't bear it. He stepped forward and said, Brother Chu. Chu Yang turned his head and said with an amiable smile, What? Does Brother Xie also want to pay the debt now? No problem. If Brother Xie can take it out now, I won't have any objections. No, it's fine. Xie Dan Qiong awkwardly wiped his sweat and retreated. Fuck, I was almost dragged in. This King of Hell Chu is really like the King of Hell. He revealed his true colors with just 1 sentence. Motherfucker, I can't afford to offend him, but I can't hide. There are 4 people on my side right now. But, Ao Xie Yun is free of debt. Moreover, Ao Xie Yun and Mo Tianyun have never seen eye to eye. So, he will never help Mo Tianyun. Ao Xie Yun is already very conscientious in not hitting someone when they are down. In case of a conflict, it would be equivalent to me, O Du Xiao, and Mo Tianyun facing Gu Du Xing, Dong Wushang, Luo Kadi, GMO, and the unpredictable King of Hell Chu. This is simply courting death. Not to mention that I still owe them. I will have to carry this infamy for my entire life if I attack them now. O Du Xiao also didn't move since Mo Tianyun didn't move. O Du Xiao and Mo Tianyun didn't have any friendship. So, how could he offend his creditor for this guy? Luo Kadi shouted, Mo Tianyun, you motherfucker. Are you going to pay the debt? Or are you going to commit suicide? You should be sincere and say something. Everyone is very busy. This second Master Luo spends billions every quarter of an hour. I can't afford to waste time with you. GMO turned his face away. His entire body twitched. Motherfucker. You spend billions every quarter of an hour. Luo Kadi really dares to brag. Look at his poor and destitute appearance. It's more like he spends dozens of copper coins every quarter of an hour. Mo Tianyun was in a difficult situation. For people from four sides were eyeing him covetously. It seemed as if they wanted to tear him apart alive. When had the dignified great young master of the Mo clan suffered such humiliation? Mo Tianyun wished that he could die. This is too shameful. This is too shameful. He was also secretly hating in his heart, why doesn't this king of hell Chu give me any face? How can a person do things so ruthlessly in Jianghu? I, Mo Tianyun, am a respectable person no matter what is said. He didn't know that Chu Yang was deliberately forcing him into a dead end. The more he forced him, the more uncomfortable he would feel. And the more Chu Yang would feel good. So, how could he be willing to be considerate of him? Mo Tianyun's complexion alternated between white and green. He wanted to roar several times. Fine. I'll stake it all. Who's afraid of whom? Isn't it just a life? If you want it, then take it. However, he didn't dare to do so when he thought of the consequences of taking action. And he also thought of the terrifying scene after Duke Yu intervened. He thought for a long time. Then he finally clenched his teeth and said, "Fine. I'll write an IOU for you. 3 days it is." Yes, this is the boldness of a great young master. This is the boldness of the future clan lord of the Mo clan. This is Mo Tianyun, great young master Mo. Chu Yang's tone was eccentric. He ridiculed to his heart's content. Brother Mo is really flexible. He can be soft or hard. He can be rough or delicate. He can advance or retreat. He can go up or down. He's really a character. Luo Kadi held his stomach and laughed wildly. Big brother, your words are too vivid. I'm thinking of second brother Gu. Gu Du Xing flew into a rage. He kicked this bastard far away. Second young master Luo begged for mercy in midair. Spare my life. I'm talking about second brother Gu's second brother. GMO and Dong Wushang's bodies twitched. Ao Xie Yun, Xie Dan Qiong, and O Du Shao also tightly pursed their mouths. They were trying their best not to laugh. The dignified great young master of the Mo clan had been described as that thing? The fact that Mo Tianyun was humiliated to such an extent was a great anecdote of the upper three heavens. Mo Tianyun immersed himself in writing. Endless feelings of humiliation had rushed into his heart. His chest had almost exploded with anger. His face had almost turned purple. In fact, blood had almost seeped out of it. But he clenched his teeth and didn't say a word. Chu Yang had finished writing the IOU after a short while. Then he carefully blew on the ink of Mo Tianyun's seal. He smiled with satisfaction. He shook it against the wind. Then he carefully folded it in half and put it in his bosom. Then he gently smiled and said, Brother Mo, let me remind you that you only have 3 days. He clicked his tongue as he said this. Then he used a frivolous tone that could infuriate a person to death and said, I have to say that Brother Mo's handwriting is pretty good. Unfortunately, it's worthless. Otherwise, these few words would have been enough to repay the debt. Mo Tianyun's lips trembled. He firmly looked at Chu Yang. His eyes had almost turned red. He clenched his teeth and said, 3 days is 3 days? Don't tell me that I, Mo Tianyun, can forget about the world-defying heavens. Brother Mo, the one who will look for you to collect the debt won't be me, Chu Yang, but Duke Yu. Don't forget that he's the notary. If I don't look for him, who will I look for? Chu Yang sighed hypocritically. I won't be responsible if Duke Yu feels uncomfortable or unhappy and does something to you. Who asked him to be the notary? Mo Tianyun's face suddenly turned pale. However, if Brother Mo can't repay the debt, I have another solution. I have another solution. Chu Yang smiled faintly. What solution? Mo Tianyun fiercely raised his head. I heard that the Mo clan recently obtained a peerless saber. Chu Yang's smile seemed to contain bloodthirst. He gently and slowly said, the exact time should be 1.5 years ago? There is such a thing, right? Mo Tianyun fiercely took 3 steps back. He looked at Chu Yang dumbfoundedly. How did you know? You don't have to worry about this. I'm just reminding you. If you can't repay the debt within 3 days, you can give me that saber within a month. Chu Yang said, I'll suffer a little loss. There was no way that 3 days would be enough. Mo Tianyun had placed all his hopes on that saber. For Chu Yang, it was indeed a loss. Because that saber, as long as he had the materials, he could make it in half a day. Moreover, he didn't need to spend any money. It was just that these few days he heard Mo Qingwu mumbling in her dreams, my saber, my saber, my saber. Chu Yang really couldn't bear it. He knew that the saber had an unusual meaning to Mo Qingwu. Moreover, Chu Yang's plan was not just to take back the saber. This was a sinister trap for Mo Tianyun. Mo Tianyun gritted his teeth. He had never felt so depressed in his life. He said, but that saber is my Mo clan's heirloom. Chu Yang smiled meaningfully. Family heirloom? Heirloom? His tone was light and extremely sarcastic. Mo Tianyun's face turned red. He shouted, what are you laughing at? Chu Yang's face changed. He coldly said, I don't care if it's an heirloom or not. You only have 4 choices. 1. Give me 525 million taels within 3 days. 2. This money will double in 3 days. The interest will compound. At most, it will compound for a month. 3. I want that saber. 4. Use your head to repay the debt. Chapter 470. Chu Yang coldly said, I think that Brother Mo should be smart enough to make this choice. I have absolute faith in your wisdom. It would be impossible to repay the debt within 3 days. If the interest rate were to double every 3 days, then it would be 1 billion for a day, 2 billion for a day, 4 billion for 12 days, and 5 billion for 15 days. Moreover, the interest would compound. Mo Tianyun might not be able to repay his debt even if he mortgaged all 3 days in 1 month. Mo Tianyun obviously wouldn't be willing to repay the debt with his head. Mo Tianyun left in a daze. He only left behind a few words before he left. I will give you that saber within a month. Chu Yang cruelly smiled as he looked at the back of Grand Duke Missouri. After Mo Tianyun left, Ao Xieyun also took his leave. He wanted to gather some of his remaining forces. Xie Dan Qiong and Odu Shao also wanted to take their leave. But Chu Yang cordially asked them to stay. Brother Xie, Brother O, take care. I still have something to say. These 2 are very valuable. Wouldn't it be too easy for them to leave? What's the matter? The 2 looked at him vigilantly. They didn't dare to underestimate King of Hell Chu, who had just come up from the lower 3 heavens. This person's means can be described as terrifying. Chu Yang warmly smiled and said, I just want to remind you 2 that the world-defying heavens has the most. In fact, the 2 of you can also use other things to replace these silvers. You don't need to gather such a huge amount of silvers. So, I consider you 2 friends. Talking about money hurts your feelings, so let's not talk about money. Xie Dan Qiong and Odu Zhao's eyes lit up at the same time. They asked, Brother Chu, what do you mean? For example, some strange elixirs, precious crystals, and materials. For example, exquisite grass, intermittent root, 7-colored jade, purple crystal, red crystal, blue crystal, star iron, nightmare steel, volcanic silver, netherworld gold. I also want as much as I can get. It wouldn't be impossible for us to make another deal if the 2 of you still have a lot of money on hand after paying off your gambling debts. Even if it's a long-term cooperation. I'm also very willing to establish a cooperative relationship with 2 trustworthy friends. Chu Yang smiled reservedly. Don't worry. This Chu won't let the 2 of you suffer a loss. No matter if the 2 of you pay off your debt or if we trade after the debt is paid off, I'll buy it at a price 20% higher than the market price. If the materials are extremely rare, I will buy them all at double the price. What do you think? What Chu Yang didn't lack the most right now was gold, silver, and gold notes. He was extremely rich and overbearing. To him, these were just rubbish. He wouldn't feel the pinch no matter how much he threw away, not to mention exchanging it for some valuable materials. Before he could finish his sentence, the two men's eyes had already brightened up. When he finished his sentence, the words, 20% higher than the market price, had opened the eyes of the two men, and a golden path had appeared in their eyes. Not to mention the subsequent doubling. How much is 20% of the market price? It could be said that if he sold something worth 1 billion yuan, he would have an additional 200 million yuan. How much wealth was that? The two great clans had hundreds of years of accumulation. These things could be said to be enormous. Some things were precious, but they couldn't be used. It would be a pity to throw them away. Moreover, the most important thing for the clans to develop their military power was money. Similarly, the most important things were the crystal stones, the inner cores of spirit beasts, and the elixirs that could assist in cultivation. Of course, these things were also rich. There was no problem in shifting them out a little. As for the so-called star iron, nightmare steel, volcanic silver, netherworld steel, and so on, they knew that these things were good, but they couldn't be used. There was nothing wrong with taking them out and selling them. The key point was that the price wasn't suitable. That's why they couldn't be sold, but this sucker before them was buying them at a price 20% higher than the market price. Wasn't this a good thing that was hard to come by? Good. It's a deal as long as Brother Chu keeps his word. Xie Dan Qiong and Odu Shao felt as if a big stone had been lifted from their hearts. The clan's vitality had already been greatly damaged. So, the clan's business would inevitably be in a mess for at least a year if they were to fork out more than 500 million yuan. This was a big and fatal problem at this critical moment. However, there wouldn't be any problem if they were to use these things to pay off the debt. Brother Chu, when do you plan to make the deal? Both of them were somewhat impatient. Chu Yang smiled amiably and said, I remember that the Xie clan and the O clan are on the road to the north. We can make the deal at any time if we arrive there, Chu Yang chuckled. We might as well travel together. Moreover, I've heard that Dark Bamboo Duke you was born in the extreme north. Gu Du Xing, Dong Wushang, and GMO looked at each other. They thought, it seems that Big Brother has made up his mind. He's going to talk about it along the way. Xie Dan Qiong and Odu Shao left feeling happy and relieved. They couldn't help but be happy. Not only did they solve a crisis, but they also found a new source of wealth for the clan. Chu Yang smiled as he watched the two leave. Then he turned his head towards GMO and said, GMO, you must remember that Mo Tianyun wants to steal the divine saber of the Mo clan. You must inform Mo Tianji in a timely manner. I believe that Mo Tianji will make Mo Tianyun very happy. But you must also tell him that I must have Qing Wu's saber. Chu Yang's eyes flashed with a luster of determination as he spoke in a heavy and resolute manner. Big Brother, I'm afraid that your billions won't be enough to spend if you want to purchase these things. Gu Du Xing hesitated. Do you want me to transfer some from the clan? GMO, Dong Wushang, and Luo Kadi also nodded in succession. They clearly had the same idea. They didn't understand why Chu Yang wanted these things. But they chose to support him unconditionally. Big Brother can do whatever he wants. These were the thoughts of these people. Gu Du Xing's words were very reasonable. Everyone knew that these strange things were treasures. There was no such market for them. However, their prices were sky-high. For example, a fist-sized piece of star iron was worth hundreds of thousands of silver taels. The more precious ones were like nightmare steel. A small piece was worth millions of silver taels. As for top-notch materials like red cloud steel, a piece the size of a human head should be worth tens of millions of silver taels. Although Chu Yang's current wealth was substantial, if he wanted to purchase all these things, it would be far, 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 far from enough. Chu Yang laughed mischievously. It's easy to not have enough silver taels. In the three heavens, the strong are respected. It's quite possible for us to plunder some wealth along the way. For example, we can steal, rob, and teach them a lesson. That's a source of wealth. The four brothers were stunned. They didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Big Brother, what should we do next? Luo Kadi was concerned about this question. Should we follow our clans or should we form a gang on our own? Chu Yang said in a relaxed manner, "This depends on what you guys think." "I want to go alone," Dong Wuxiang said firmly. "Me too," GMO said. "Me too. Me too," Luo Kudi quickly responded. "Tell me your reasons." Chu Yang knew that their so-called going alone meant that they wanted to be with him and leave their clans. Regarding this, he didn't show any expression. Chu Yang wasn't like his brothers who would give up anything for him. Therefore, he said, "Even if we follow our clans, we're still going in the same direction. We can still see each other every day." "I don't feel well." Dong Wuxiang's eyes showed pain. "I'm willing to give up everything for my clan. But there are some things that I can't bear. But I have no other choice." Chu Yang nodded in understanding. Dong Wuxiang should be talking about his elder brother, Dong Wulei. He pondered for a while. Then he chose a fair angle and said, "Wuxiang, your elder brother still loves you very much. However, there were some things that a person in power had to have. You have to understand this. It's because I understand that I'm in pain." Dong Wuxiang also sighed. "Me too. Elder brother is very good to me. But my existence will threaten him." Luo Kadi raised his hand and said, "Also, what he did today makes me very uncomfortable. So, I have to leave for a few days to let him reflect." This was somewhat similar to a child's quarrel. His words made several people laugh. "I don't want to go with the clan because my elder brother is too lazy." GMO hung his head dejectedly. "The most diligent thing he's doing now is to think of ways to make me the Grand Duke in his place. I'm really scared. Can I be the clan lord with this kind of material? It's simply a joke. I don't want to care about the clan's trivial matters. I want to fight in the martial world, have no worries, hug my wife, go everywhere, go home when I miss home, be filial to my parents, stay for a few days, and then go out to have fun. This is the life I want." Everyone was speechless. "You guys can easily follow your elder brother to have fun. But what about me?" Gu Duxing was somewhat angry. "Someone killed 2 people. The direct consequence is that I'm tied to the clan. Do you think I'll abandon the Gu clan? What's wrong with that?" Luo Kadi put his arm around his shoulder. "We brothers will cover our faces and follow your Gu clan's troops. Then we'll walk faster than the other clans. Wouldn't it be the best of both worlds as long as we don't expose our identities?" Mo's eyes lit up and he said, "You're right. Besides, our heavenly armament pavilion should be awe-inspiring in the 3 heavens. How about we all cover our faces or make masks? Then we'll rob and steal together." Everyone's eyes lit up together. "Good. We, the heavenly armament pavilion, will begin to show our faces from tomorrow onwards." Chu Yang pondered for a while and said, "All right. Then, I'll make some small things tonight as the heavenly armament pavilion symbol." All the brothers cheered. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.